Good morning, dear students. A very good morning to every one of us. The Department of English, Karnataka State Open University. I welcome you again to this 4-day online classes sessions. And coming back to the yesterday discussion that we were in, remember we were all discussing about Geoffrey Chaucer's, the very classic narrative poem that the Canterbury Tales, general prologue to the Canterbury Tales. I was saying that it is just a mere general prologue, giving each and every character portraiture, introducing every character belongs to different sect of society. And whereas the tales are not being introduced to us, we are not going to study the tales, what tales they said, but we only understanding that how Geoffrey Chaucer portrayed, made a gallery of all these characters. He introduces the characters one after another. For example, yesterday we discussed knight, and after that we discussed the prioress, and after that we were discussing monk, isn't it? So even before that, just to brush up your mind, let me coming back to a little bit about even more introduction about it, so that you will get a track. See, I told you there are 30 pilgrims, isn't it? So all gather, they meet at the Tabardin at Southwark. That's fine. And here, the Chaucer made the best use of this occasion to depict a cross-section of his contemporary society. So Geoffrey Chaucer, he's commenting, or he's portraying the contemporary society of 14th century. How the 14th century was prevailed upon in terms of religious society, in terms of the monarchy, or in terms of kind of economic society, and with the character of merchant and all, segregated, different segregations of society. He was introducing a typical 14th century society. And then he gives us a detailed picture of each pilgrims with her characteristic countenance. So accurately, with 100% acumen, he gives with the utmost authenticity about the characters. Nowhere he glorifies. So it is called as a realism, a naturalism and realism text. The Geoffrey Chaucer, the Canterbury Tales. So he has an eye for detail and describes them with a subtle sense of irony and the humor. We can understand that he uses both the irony and the humor because he also touches both the negative and the positive sides of these characters, isn't it? So that is one thing. And I must tell you, Dryden, Dryden, a great poet of English literature, he uses a sentence. He tells that this poem, that is the Canterbury Tales, here is a God's plenty indeed. This is the quotation that he uses. What does he say? The Dryden says that this. So the Dryden says that about this poem, that it is here is a God's plenty indeed, because all the entire society are put together in this group. I told you the pilgrims belong to the several groups, and there is a clear sense of class consciousness. This is a very important term. There is a clear sense of class consciousness in the rank they hold, in the language they speak, and the tales they tell. There are three things. Here is a class consciousness, and there is the language that they speak, and here is we also understand the kind of the tales that they tell. And they completed the tale. Some tales are incompleted, but in the prescribed syllabus, we are not introduces any kind of tales, but rather a mere description. So here, the pilgrims world as the fighting group of knight, the square, and the yeoman. And all the different characters I was saying yesterday, and this is one thing. And let me come back to the character analysis. So yesterday we were talking about the character that's a monk, and so here let me introduce you another character, that is the Clerk of Oxford. So here is an educational group. So now yesterday we understood the religious group and the merchantine class, the economic class, like a merchant, the monk, sorry, merchant we haven't come across yet. So we understood the religious group, and the chivalry, like how the knight was so brave and he was excellent in the war, and the way he just came so hastily and he presented before all the pilgrims, isn't it? So we understood that yesterday. And let me introduce you another character. So I may introduce you only a few characters because describing each and every character time is not sufficient. So today I'll introduce you 2-3 characters and I'll wind up the text and we'll get into another an important novel of Victorian literature. So what is about the Oxford the Clerk? So the Clerk of Oxford has all the characteristics of a scholar. So even when you write for your exams, however that I've been narrating, because I gave you the introduction, the description, the class consciousness, and the religious group, everything has to be neatly presented one after another. You should also speak about the important character. Probably you may not able to put all the 30 characters, isn't it, in your exam paper for 10 marks. So what you have to do, you mention the 30 characters and you describe the few important characters. Could be like knight, or the friar, or a monk, and Oxford. So I found a few characters are very significant here. I'll deliberately, Chaucer, he intended upon them. He described their unique features. And then the Clerk of the Oxford has all the characteristics of a scholar. He's an excellent scholar. He is as lean as the horse he rides. He's a very lean man. And he cares much more for his books. Okay? And he worries for his attire. So he's a very much a good sense of attire, and he's a very much cares his books. And then he's dependent on his friends for support. This scholar, he's depended completely for any kind of support. He speaks but little, but he utters is set in a grave and reverential tone. That is very important. It shows that he's a great scholar. He speaks in a reverential tone. Reverential tone ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಒಬ್ಬರಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಪೂಜ್ಯತಾ ಭಾವನೆಯಿಂದ ಮಾತಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದು. So the scholar is a typical scholar because he's a well-read man and he uses with a reverential tone. So that is a term which we can appreciate in him. He's full of highly thoughts and moral reflections. So he's a full of high thoughts, lot of thoughts are germinate, and what happened, and moral reflections. So that is his tendency. He's a true character. So he is as glad to learn of others as he teaches to himself. So he would like to learn from people, and he will also make people to learn. So it is a reciprocal in his approach. The clerk normally meant a scholar or educated person. Here, the clerk is university student preparing for the priesthood. Though he's a scholar, he's a clerk, and he's preparing for his priesthood. So he wanted to attire the priest, priesthood. And the association of learning and the church in medieval time is evident in this portrait. So the kind of medieval time is very much evident in this portrait. So the clerk is a long devoted himself to the study of logic. So he devoted himself to study the logic, an important part of academic life. So logic is considered as a very important, academic life. But whereas, if you remember our Dr. Faustus day before yesterday, and he tells that the logic, it is always, talks about the disputes with the petty issues. Always keep on arguing things. But whereas our clerk, the Canterbury Tales clerk, he's very much fascinated with. The clerk long devoted himself to the study of logic, an important part of academic life. So Aristotle was one of the great authorities in Chaucer time. 1 minute. Sorry for the interruption. So what happened? So he was very much fascinated for this subject, that is, logic. So Aristotle was one of the great authorities in Chaucer time. So Aristotle was a great authorities on Chaucer time. So because Aristotle is a great philosopher, he was very much inspired to many people during the time of Chaucer. So what happened? The influence of his moral philosophy was predominant in the medieval universities, because that Aristotle is a great philosopher who known for his excellent work, that's a poetics. So during the time of 14th century, the people of now Chaucer time, the medieval time people, they're very much inspired by this the philosophy of Aristotle, and they all try to inculcate certain values and the doctrine from the Aristotle philosophy. And further, if you tell about the Clerk of Oxford, he received help from his friends. He is ever grateful to those who helped him. He's a moral quality. He's a poor and a humbly dressed. He's, it shows that how amicable and how amiable person he was. So after that, he represents the ancient traditions of a scholarship and the learning. The clerk, he represents the ancient traditions of scholarship and the learning. His ideals of high sentiments and the moral earnestness are juxtaposed with his disregard for the worldly wealth. So there is two juxtaposed we understand from him. So one way he represents the typical scholarship of the learning. Another way he also gives up the worldly wealth. He was not at all after the worldly pleasure, the wealth and all that. So it tells that how Chaucer so here the clerk is a worthy of respect in the best sense for his sincerity and the integrity. This is a very important. Why I reiterating at this juncture about the qualities of the clerk, because Chaucer says that the clerk is a worthy respect in the best sense for his sincerity and the integrity. He's never ever after the mundane life. He's never ever after that the kind of the worldly pleasure. He never ever after that all the wealth and all that, but rather he always seeks to gain his knowledge, and is very much influenced by the Aristotle philosophy, and he's not after wealth, and he's only concerned for his kind of earnestness and righteousness, and his kind of the way he respects people. I use the word that very reverentiality. That is important, because in hailing, attributing such kind of feelings is quite a rare. So according to Chaucer, the clerk is he stands in the highest rank of civility for his conduct. And after that, this is another important character I would like to introduce you. That the next character, he's wife of Bath. So wife of Bath supposed to be today. She's the fourth character, I believe. The first is the knight, and after that the prioress and the monk, and then we had the clerk, and now it is a wife of Bath. It's also very important to know about this character, because sometimes or only poems, the wife of Bath character itself somehow in so many other universities they are prescribed as a poem, just a wife of Bath character. So just imagine then how important her character portrayal in this poem. So let me hope you are able to follow me. Okay, you're on. Yes. So coming back to the wife of Bath, and she's a very, very skillful in cloth making. The fine dexterous. She excellent. She's a very, very much efficient in terms of cloth making. So this we should understand about Chaucer, and she writes a comfortable and an ambler. She has wedded 5 times. This is a very strange, very important. This lady, she married the 5 times. Okay, and she's a great stickler for her dignity and the rights of citizens in the church. So she has her own she maintains her own dignity in many other religious issues as such. And the wife of Bath has bold features. She's a very bold and very straightforward, and she's attractive as well as outspoken. This is very important about her. She's very attractive and she's outspoken. She's slightly deaf and gap-toothed. She's slightly deaf and a gap-toothed. So the gap between her teeth and her physical the description here. She wears a red riding shirt, expensive footwear. She wears a red riding shirt and expensive footwear. And here her handkerchief are of fine texture, since she was a skillful in cloth making. Because I told you in the beginning itself, she's an excellent, efficient cloth maker, and she had a handkerchief which has a fine texture, since she was a skillful in cloth making, and she's surpassing others in the trade. Andre surpassing in this is like ellarna meerisi mundi hogiruvantaharu. She's excellent in this kind of a trade, like cloth making. And she wear a headgear inordinately large and elaborate, common during the time. And she talks loudly. She talks more than listened. And there is Chaucer also uses a kind of a humoric tone. I mean, the humor and the kind of a irony or a wit through this character. He says that she talks more than she listened. So she's a very talkative. There is one word in English for talkative. It is loquacious. Loquacious andre ಸಿಕ್ಕಾಬಟ್ಟೆ ಮಾತಾಡೋರು. I tell the spelling. LOQUACIOUS. Loquacious. So our wife of Bash is a loquacious. She speaks a lot. She has traveled widely. Hope you have been documenting, you have been taking down certain important points. Certainly help you for your exam point of view, isn't it? So make sure that whenever something strikes your mind that is important, please you immediately take a note about it. Of course you have been doing it sincerely. And she has traveled widely. She has a enormous travel. Apart from night, she's the only pilgrim who knows a great deal of wandering, because we know that our character that Knight has traveled a lot. He had been to Alexandria, had been to Africa and many other places, isn't it? And he had traveled extensively. But whereas after the Knight, she seems to be the second one who also traveled so much. And she has traveled widely. Apart from the Knight, she's the only pilgrim who knows a great deal of wandering. She knows to deal the wandering business. She can deal with it easily. She'll never have any kind of hindrances, rather any kind of disturbances. And she went on pilgrimage to Jerusalem thrice. Remember, that means we also understand how ardent a religious follower is she. And she's and what happened, she's an ardent follower of the religious practices. And she had been to Jerusalem thrice. And then Chaucer doesn't specify whether she went to the holy places with devout intention or a fun or enjoyment. Even Chaucer also a lot of a skeptic in his mind. A skeptic antandre ಒಂದು ಸಂಶಯವಾಗಿ ನೋಡುವಂತದ್ದು. Even Chaucer had a skeptic towards her because she had a traveled so extensively, right? So he thinks that probably she had gone for the travel. Is it really for the religious purpose? Because she had been to Jerusalem thrice, of course, for a reason, for the religious purpose. But even he has a skeptic towards about her. Chaucer doesn't specify whether she went to the holy places with a devotion intention or for fun or enjoyment. He has that kind of a skeptic towards her. And then her attractive disposition, her material adventures. See, attractive disposition. We know that kind of attire, dexterous kind of a handkerchiefs, and apart from her material adventures, going to different places, and then her loquacious behavior, talking so much, and other social accomplishments speaks of her energetic participation in life, which is absolutely admire of Chaucer. So Chaucer had a different, kind of admiration towards this character. And after that, we have another important character that I won't be able to get into all the characters. So what I'll do, and this could be the last character, I just tell you about him, and I just stop the characters because I just told you that I'll just give you 5 important characters, and I'll get back to another novels because there are few more texts to be dealt within. Yet tomorrow is the last day, as you know. And then the parson is also a very important character. The parson is an embodiment of all that a clergyman should be. That means absolutely Chaucer is glorifying this parson. Look at the way he says. The parson is an embodiment, is an epitome, is an embodiment of all that a clergyman should be. A priestly class person, how he's supposed to be, and he fulfilled all the credentials. He's a priest of spiritual virtue. My goodness, look at the way he's the word. Here, there is nothing pretensions. There is nothing to be pretentious here. He says out for so straightforwardly, saying that he is a priest of a spiritual virtue, and who is placed next to the person of worldliness in the wife of Bath. A simplicity, unselfishness, and honesty, learning, open-handed charity, and untiring devotion of his flock or some of his virtues as a priest. The parson, as a priest, he had 4 important traits. ಆ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಟ್ರೇಡ್ಸ್ ಯಾವ್ದಪ್ಪ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅವನ ಗುಣಲಕ್ಷಣಗಳು ಏನಪ್ಪ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಬ್ಬ ಪ್ರೀಸ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಒಂದು ಈಸ್ ಸೋ simplicity, and is unselfishness, and honesty learning, and the open-handed charity, and untiring devotions. There is lost longing devotions. isn't it? And because sometimes in the midway through we may do not believe in the presence of God or whatever, but whereas his devotions is untiring, it's always builds it, retires it, he strengthens the bondage between himself and the God. And to his flock, and open-handed charity, open-handed charity. And then these are these virtue characters. So he scrupulously practiced what he preached. Scrupulously, and then we know that so carefully. He so carefully and scrupulously practiced what he preached. Because he's a preacher, right? He has to preach. ಧರ್ಮದ ಸಂದೇಶಗಳನ್ನ preach ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. So he's very scrupulously followed that. And he sought to draw people to a better life. To the better life by example. By example. You have some questions. Is it? It is very interesting to listen about analysis of characters in this link by Chaucer. Were all those pilgrims friends? There is a question. Okay, let me look at the question. Were all those pilgrims friends of the poet? I mean, how they were related to the poet as he invented them to his pilgrimage. But in a true sense, I must tell you, Chaucer, he did not intensify any characters. He's not intended to bring any kind of personal characters here. So, or whether the friends. Chaucer, he wanted to portray how the 14th century society was, because the clergyman, the kind of a hierarchy, how we classified the hierarchy, religious group, and then priestly class, economic class, and then the education and the common people, like the guildsmen were there. I left guildsmen. So okay, and guide 3, please information about the question paper. See, when you are not even listening to the class, how do you expect me to give you the question paper? Forget about all that. Question papers can be given, can be downloaded from the website out there. So you can put any kind of questions pertaining to your class analysis. And then, so he scrupulously practiced what he preached. He sought to draw people to a better life of example and kindness. He cared not for worldly pomp, but for the taught gospels of the Christ. So we know that he's a true preacher who going to take the entire substance of Christianity to the people. So he's an obedient priest. He's an ideal representative of the secular clergy. He's representing the class. He's representing the whole class of clergymen, and placed against the monastic orders. And he against the monastic orders, and whose vices Chaucer exposed and ridiculed earlier. Because some people, those who have not maintained that kind of the monastic life, so they did not even keep up certain sanctity of the religious ideas. But here, as Chaucer says, that the parson is a very good person who literally. So I just gave you the 5 important characters. So now how Chaucer winds up his statement. So I'll take another 8 to 10 minutes, then I'll get into another novel that I have to teach as my slots are here. So what happened? So Chaucer says that okay. So in the following passage, Chaucer defends his art of portrayal. So after he describes all the characters, and Chaucer, he defends that. Chaucer defends his art of portrayal. He speaks plainly, which is not due to the lack of his breeding, but he wishes to tell his tale truthfully without inventing. He's not inventing any character. Listen, I just told you this statement purposely. He wishes to tell his tale truthfully without inventing. He's not inventing any character, not imaginary, but he wanted to project the society of 14th century contemporary life of Chaucer. How the entire society was embraced the Christianity, religious values, because the old Christianity was practiced in England. But how people have been accepted in a different way, that is important. So Chaucer wanted to project these people, the different sect of society. So he says that he gave justice by depicting the entire characters. So now, another thing is that Chaucer depicts the secular world of different professions, which gives a vivid impressions of life and society as observed by him. He was a true observer, a very keen observer. He says that he depicts the secular world of different. So don't you think so? There are some secularity in the people approach. They're not so rigid in terms of religion. They're not so pragmatic. They're not so too much of involved with religious practices, isn't it? They are more concerned. They're more concerned with the liberal attitude, because they celebrate the humanism, they celebrate the liberal attitude, and as so we can say they're very much secular in that approach. So here, the Chaucer depicts the secular world of different professions, which give a vivid impressions of life and society as he observed. See, observed this, entire society, and here it shows that it tells that how Chaucer was so serious in his approaching the text, and how sincere he was, and he tells his competency in terms of bringing the character as it is from the life society. So ಅಷ್ಟಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಅವನು ತನ್ನ he uses his seriousness, sincerity, and competence and the capacity. So the result of Canterbury Tales. And the last important thing is that, so the prologue, the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales, is the concise portrait of an entire nation. This is very important. See, this is very important, and it is the concise portrait on the Sankshiptavadanta ಒಂದು gallery portrait of an entire nation, entire Britain country, entire London, whole nation, high or low, old or young, okay, male and female, lay and clergyman, learned or ignorant, rogue or righteous, land and sea, town and country, but without extremes. So he uses his own yardstick. Nowhere he exaggerated. There is nowhere is a grotesque. Nowhere he exaggerated. He give a true. He holds a mirror to the true nature of these characters, because he wanted to depict the entire nations of England. And then, so apart from stunning clarity, touched with nuances of the characters presented, the most noticeable thing about them is their normality. They are the perennial progeny of men and women. This is the important things. So they're all the perennial progeny. They are the classic, they are the everlasting. The same characters are there even after ages, years after years, decades after decades, even 30th century, 14th century, however it rolls around, rollbacks, and these characters are the perennial ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಇಂದು ಮುಟ್ಟಲಾಗದಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಗುರಿ. So do this humanity meets an end? No, it revolves around, because as you have read the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, the Origin of Species, it is a revolves around, isn't it? One after, it's a cycling, there is no ending to it. So he says that, so all these characters, they're the progeny, they're the perennial progeny. There is no end for them of men and women, whether the men or women. So this is the result of Geoffrey Chaucer, the Canterbury Tales. And dear learners, somehow I just wanted to give you a text in a very clear, concise way, because despite of many characters, around 30 characters, I could able to give you a few characters like the host, and the character, the narrator, and then the first important character, that's a knight, and after that, the prioress, the parson, and the monk, and the wife of Bath, and the Oxford, the clerk. So they represented their own the class consciousness. They represent the community. So somehow I wanted to give a justice about these characters, and I think hope you did understand. And Chaucer also defended that. So he says that I just wanted to bring the entire notion in an umbrella term, in a concept. So that I said that how Dryden says that. So here is a God's plenty, isn't it? So the God is dwelling here. The Christ dwells here. So this is what all about in this the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. So now I'll get into another text. Okay, shall we get into another text? Yeah. I said that you want me to repeat the important characters. See, the characters are, as I told you, the important characters are like, as I described, the 7 characters, like the poet himself, the host, the 2, and then the knight, and the prioress, and the parson, and the monk, the clergyman, Oxford the clerk, and then the last but not the least, that's the wife of Bath. So these are the 7 important characters that I consider as a very important character as such, and the rest of the characters like the guildsman and the lawman and other thing, So see, you are talking about what kind of questions do we expect on Chaza, and for which, see, I must tell you one thing. What the notes that has been given to you, the study materials, behind every notes, there are a lot of questions given over there. You will need to look into that. We also take a question from there and we'll give it to you. So don't worry about it. When it comes to questions, we go to the study material. The study material has been given to you so far now, and you read the Canterbury Tales, and after that, after every unit, you're given some important questions. So they're very sufficient for your exam point of view. So now, coming back to another very important character, important novel, that is Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights, it's written by Emily Bronte. Emily Bronte. So it is there in paper. I think it's there in the 19th century English literature. You have this paper in the MA previous, the course for 19th century literature. There you have this text, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So are you aware of this text? So certainly you are all aware of this text, and then let us get into the Wuthering Heights. So here we are. The writer, the Emily Bronte, the writer, she is a Victorian novelist. See, when we talk about the Victorian novelist, these are the things that we should keep it in our mind. The class consciousness, gender inequalities, material life, emergence of science and technology, giving up the religion. Because when you read, Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species, otherwise a movement called Victorian Compromise, at the end of 19th century, and during the time of French Revolution, what happened? The entire world, they did not want. Concerned to England, they did not want this kind of religion. They wanted to embrace the science and technology, the new invention, the new approaches. And this is the time when this novel was written, the Victorian time. That was a time when the Puritanism was so rampant. The religious, ideals are very strict. They ought to be followed. People ought to be followed. They should not violate the kind of norms of the society. So this is the time when the Uddering Writes was written by Emily Bronte, and this is the only novel written. And our sister, the novel, that's Jane Eyre. Who wrote that? Jane Eyre is written by her own sister. I forgot the name. And Charlotte Bronte. Yes, Charlotte Bronte, who writes the Jane Eyre. And whereas they are the three sisters. Okay, so Emily Bronte's The Uddering Writes was the only novel, and it is considered as a classics in the world history of English literature. It's a masterpiece. And when the novel was published, people, they did not want to accept the text. They just wanted to reject. The people have put a lot of comment about it. I saw yesterday some characters in the study material. Oh, good. Okay. Fine. So when the novel has been published, the people of the Victorian society, the Londoners, they wanted to give up this book. They wanted to burn it. How can a writer, Emily Bronte, can project a novel like this? How could it be possible? She explored something cannot be explored. She wrote something which cannot be written. What is that? This novel is considered as a Gothic novel. This novel considered as a Gothic novel. Gothic novel, I just read out some features about the Gothic fiction. I tell you, what are the features of a Gothic novel and why this novel and ought to be banished, and this novel should not be read and all that. But gradually this has become a classics in the world history, English literature. Because a servant, because a gypsy, an orphan like Heathcliff, who became an adopted son, a foster son to the head of the family of Uddering Writes, that is a Mr. Earnshaw, a gypsy, Heathcliff, orphan Heathcliff, and he's a foster son to the Mr. Earnshaw. Mr. Earnshaw is the head of the family of Uddering Writes. When he had been to the Liverpool on a trip, he picked this gypsy, an orphan boy, and he brought him home. and he asks his two children, that is a Hindley and Catherine, to take care of this boy, an orphan boy. ಇವ ಹುಡುಗನ ಜೊತೆ ಇವನನ್ನು ಲಿವರ್ಪೂಲ್ಗೆ ಹೋದಾಗ ಒಬ್ಬ ಅನಾಥ ಹುಡುಗ ಸಿಕ್ಕದ, ಇವನನ್ನ ಕರ್ಕೊ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೀನಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳ, ನಿಮ್ ಜೊತೆ ಇವನನ್ನ ನೀವು ಬೆಳೆಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಯು ಟ್ರೀಟ್ ಹಿಮ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಯುವರ್ ಬ್ರದರ್ ಅಂತ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾನೆ ಮಿಸ್ಟರ್ ಹನ್ಶಾ. He lives the Heathcliff along with this Catherine and Hindley. And gradually what happens? After the end of the novel, we understand that Heathcliff and the Catherine, they become true lovers, the platonic lovers. And whereas the norms of the society, the norms of the Victorian society did not allow, and even these two, Heathcliff, a servant, an orphan, and a Catherine, she's a beautiful young lady of Mr. Henshaw, daughter of Mr. Henshaw, and though they loved each other, and Catherine, she did not marry him just because of his class, just because he belongs to a lower class, just because he happens to be an orphan boy. And whereas she marries the neighbor house person, a very handsome, beautiful person, that's an Edgar Linton, and she marries him. And the servant called Nellie and asks Catherine. And Nellie Catherine says to Nellie saying that, Nellie, I love Heathcliff more than I love myself. I am Heathcliff, Nellie, but I can't marry him. Because the class, because the culture, the society did not allow her to marry him, to the Heathcliff, and she prefers to marry a very handsome, societally very rich, and the one who matches to her society, her standard, her class. And after that, how the tragic death took place. The entire novel has been, roars with a ghost, spirits. Catherine dies a fine day, and she became a ghost, and she's there in the house of Uddering Heights. And Heathcliff, he did not marry Catherine, and he marries later on, Edgar Linton's sister, in terms of taking revenge. That is Isabella Linton. And Isabella Linton being tortured so brutally by Heathcliff, and a fine day she also dies, giving a birth to a child. And here Heathcliff has become completely mad, almost like kind of the mentally shocked, and he led a tragic life, and each and every time he lives in the memory of Catherine. And whereas Hindley, the brother of Catherine, always ill-treats him, brutalizes him, and he kills him. He doesn't kill him, he tortures him. And here, gradually, a fine day, Hindley, he dies of making a lot of loans and dwindle into gambling, and he drinks so much and he dies. And his son, Hayton, will be fostered by Heathcliff. ಆ ಹಿಂಡ್ಲೆ ಮಗನನ್ನ Heathcliff ಸಾಕ್ತಾನೆ. ಹೆಂಗ್ ಸಾಕ್ತಾನೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಅವನು ಕೂಡ ಒಬ್ಬ the way Hindley treated Heathcliff, in the same way Heathcliff treated Hayton, the son of Hindley. So ಈ ತರ whole novel reverberates, ಪ್ರತಿಧ್ವನಿಸುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾವ ತರ? Revenge, hatred, bloodshed, killing, ghost, and everything completely. The novel is completely the kind of horror, horrifying things. That's the reason why this novel is called as a Gothic novel. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ ವಾಟ್ ಆರ್ ದ ಫೀಚರ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಗಾಥಿಕ್ ಫಿಕ್ಷನ್? ಮೊದಲು ನಾವು ಗಾಥಿಕ್ ನಾವೆಲ್ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಏನೋ ಓದ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬರೋಣ. ಓಕೆ, ಎಸ್, ಐ ಟೆಲ್ ಯು, ಡೋಂಟ್ ವರಿ, ರಮೇಶ್ ಯಾರಗಲ್, ಐ ಆಮ್ ವೆರಿ ಹ್ಯಾಪಿ. ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಅ ವೆರಿ ಪರ್ಟಿನೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್, ವೆರಿ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆಂಟ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್ಸ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ರೈಸಿಂಗ್. ವಾಟ್ ಆರ್ ದ ಕ್ಯಾರೆಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಗಾಥಿಕ್ ನಾವೆಲ್ಸ್? ಎಸ್, ದ ಕ್ಯಾರೆಕ್ಟರಿಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಫೀಚರ್ಸ್ ಇವಾಗ ನಿಮ್ಮಿಂದ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. So I must tell you always, see, when you want to read some Gothic novels, fictions, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಬುಕ್ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಗ್ಲಾಸರಿ ಆಫ್ ಲಿಟರರಿ ಟರ್ಮ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ರಿಟನ್ ಬೈ M.H. Abraham. ಸೊ ಅವ್ರು ಬರೆದಿರುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಬುಕ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, the glossary of literums, ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ನಾನು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಕ್ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತೀನಿ. Because the book gives you a very authentic words about what you mean by Gothic novel and Gothic fiction is all about. See, ಆ Gothic novelಗಳಲ್ಲಿ the locale, the place ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ಆ Gothic novel ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುವಂತದ್ದು, see, ನಮ್ಗೆ there are different types of novels. We have epistolary novels ಅಂತ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. The novels written in the form of the letters. For example, we have Pamela, the first English epistolary novel. So we have an epistolary novel as a different form: epistolary novel, Gothic novel, Bildungsroman, and the Picaresque novel, and many other types of educational novel, and many other types of novels. And what do you mean by Gothic novel? So the locale was often a gloomy castle. Gloomy andre tumba kaggatlu kavdirutte. Gloomy, and the castle furnished. It looked like a castle, looked like a mansion. It doesn't seem to be like an ordinary house. It looks in a different way. So, for example, if somebody gets into the house, you feel so horrifying, ಅನ್ನೋ ತರ ಭಾವನೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಗಾಥಿಕ್ ನಾವೆಲ್ ಬರುವಂತ ಲೊಕೇಲ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾನು ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. And then what happens further, and dungeons, look everywhere, look at the dungeons, the kind of a scary places, and and then after that there are the sufferings imposed upon an innocent. There will be a lot of suffering on an innocent, imposing on an innocent, and then very cruel and the lustful villain. ಇನ್ನೋಸೆಂಟ್ ವಿಲನ್, ಇನ್ನೋಸೆಂಟ್ ಹುಡುಗಿ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ, ಇನ್ನೋಸೆಂಟ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಏನ್ ಕರಿತೀವಿ, ದ ಇನ್ನೋಸೆಂಟ್ ಆಸ್ ವೆಲ್ ಆಸ್ ದ ಕ್ರೂಯಲ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. You have this concept of the songs of innocence and songs of experiences of both by William and Blake, isn't it? So there are also different features of the innocent and as well as experiences. So here the Gothic fiction alli the innocent heroine irtare, the heroines are very innocent, like our Catherine, because she worried for the society, worried for the brother, worried for the father, and worried for the people, and she did not marry Heathcliff, because she's not so matured enough. She's a very innocent, and once she marries and she worried for the society, worrying for the society. That was a puritanic values. They impose certain norms and conditions, restrictions to people on for life. So here Kathleen, she's innocent, and there will also be a lustful villain. So in the Gothic novel we see the characters are very lustful villains, and then and made the bountiful use of ghost. Listen me, somebody asked me questions on the features of Gothics. So here the ghosts are also quite common. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬ್ಲಡ್ ಚಿಲ್ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ, the killing, the blood chill, haunted house, ghost pictures, and kind of cruel, innocent, hatred, love, revenge. All these things are quite common when you talk about the Gothic fictions. And then ghost, so mysterious disappearances and other sensational supernatural occurrences. There will be a lot of supernatural elements are also in the Gothic fictions. Ivella nama novel kuda barutte. So all these features are there even in a Gothic novel. And these novels, Gothic novels, they evoke a chilling terror by exploiting mystery and various horrors. Very, very important. See, the Gothic fictions, Gothic novels, they evoke chilling Yes, fine. So what happened? So the kind of a horror you can also come across in a Gothic fiction. And there are nightmares. There are nightmare terrors. For example, the best example, Uddering Writes by Emily Bronte, and the Charlotte Bronte's The Jane Eyre, Charles Dickens' The Bleak House, and then Susanna Gabber, The Madwoman in the Attic, and many other examples. You have excellent examples like The Mysteries of Udolpho. And then if you get into this book, Glossary of Literary Terms by M.H. Abraham, you understand the definitions of Gothic fiction. So the first Gothic fictions like Horace Walpole's The Castles of Otranto. So these are how the Gothic novels have been developed, and a lot of Gothic fictions are there in English literature. Okay, and coming back to today's text, that is Uddering Writes. Now, much before I get into the story analysis, much before my analysis of the characters, the story, let me introduce you some characters. Perhaps you are right, is Harry Potter to a Gothic fiction? Okay, perhaps because Harry Potter I haven't seen completely, like bits and pieces, but it's left you to judge about it. So now I'll introduce you the characters. Okay, in this session I'll introduce you some characters, all the characters, and then probably in the noon session I'll take up for analysis of this entire novel. So listen me carefully. This is a very complex novel, and in terms of the technique in the sense of narration itself is a very much experiment here. because when the novel begins, the first speaker, the first narrator here is Mr. Lockwood. Is a tenant. Mr. Lockwood is a tenant. ಅವನು ನಾವಲ್ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭದಾಗ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಅವನು ಒಬ್ಬನೇ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತಾನೆ ಒಂದು ದೊಡ್ಡ ಮೂರದು. Because Uddering Heights is situated in a forest, in mid forest. Is coming to seeking for a house for a rent. So he's a tenant. ಅವನೊಂದು ಮನೆನ ಬಾಡಿಗೋಸ್ಕರ ಹುಡುಕ್ತಾ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇರ್ತಾನೆ. So he's coming across to the moor towards Uddering Heights to see the owner. Okay, to see the owner, that is Mr. Heathcliff. So when the novel begins, Heathcliff is the owner of both the houses, Uddering Heights as well as Thrushcross Grange. There are two families, Thrushcross Grange as well as Uddering Heights. Both the houses are under control with Mr. Heathcliff. So, I mean, I told you he's an orphan, and how all of a sudden he has become a owner of the house, because generations of the generations, and as of now, in the third generations, the first generation is Mr. Hanshaw and the Mr. Linton. Linton family is a Thrushcross Grange, and Mr. Hanshaw family is Uddering Heights. Please listen me carefully. Mr. Hanshaw's family. Mr. Hanshaw family is Uddering Heights. Mr. Linton family is Thrushcross Grange. So all the head of the families are died. No, they're not at all alive. They died. Whereas now, Mr. Heathcliff, he is the Mr. Heathcliff Hanshaw, because Hanshaw, he's a foster father, right? So we can say Mr. Heathcliff Hanshaw, but let us say as a Heathcliff. So Heathcliff, he is a owner of both the houses, and that Mr. Lockwood, he enters the house. He enters the house and he's seeking for, he wants to meet the owner of the house, that is Mr. Heathcliff. And he searched everywhere, he did not find anywhere. And he a bit worried. And the same day, he had to stay on the day. Because there was a raining and all that, he had to stay on the day. He could not go. And he stayed in the house of Uddering Heights. And when Mr. Lockwood was sleeping, Mr. Lockwood is sleeping, and somebody entered from the window and knocked at the door. Let me in, let me in, let me in. It is nothing but the ghost of a Catherine. Catherine, she's died because she's a daughter of Mr. Hanshaw. She's also, because she grew in the house. Which house? That's Uddering Heights. So when Mr. Lockwood, the tenant, is sleeping because he couldn't meet his owner on the day, and he had to stay on the day in the house. And when he was sleeping, somebody knocked at the door. Let me in. It is nothing but the ghost of ghost of Catherine. And and the moment he says that to the next time when Heathcliff came, he informs about his experience, and he scolds him. How did you allow to enter to the house of that particular room? In fact, that was a room of Catherine. Who allowed you to? So he scolds him, and after that, he was sent back to Thrushcross Grange so that he can stay there. And Thrushcross Grange is vacant now. He can stay there at Thrushcross Grange, and where he met a narrator. They met a servant, that's a Nelidin. And he asked the Nelidin, I had a very terrific experience in the house. What had happened? Who is that ghost? I mean, probably somebody with an apparition of a girl was asking me to let me in. I had a terrific night, Nelidin. You just tell me what had happened. And then Nelidin, she narrates the whole story to Mr. Lockwood. Nodi Lockwood. Nano, before I come to Thrushcross Grange, I was a servant of Mr. Hanshaw's house. ಅವಾಗ ಒಂದು ದಿನ Mr. Hanshaw had been to the Liverpool, a fair, on the jatra ಹೋಗಿರ್ತಾನೆ, and he brought back his son, a boy called Heathcliff, because Heathcliff was crying. He was an orphan boy, he was crying, and he brought him back to the house, and then everything happened. They saw. So Nelidin, she started the narration. So here we have two narrations. When the novel opens, Mr. Lockwood is telling, sitting in a house of Catherine, a house of Uddering Heights, he writes a diary. This is my experience. This is all what happened. I came to the house, and in the night he started his writing diary and mentioning all his experiences of the day, Catherine's incident and all that, and much before he goes to Thrushcross Grange. So here in the novel begins, Lockwood is a narrator. He expresses his initial experiences in the house, and after he went to Tuscas Grange, and there Nellie she has become a second narrator, and she tells the story of the entire family. Are you able to follow me? You're getting the story? Any confusions, student? Because the Uddering Writes is such that, and so let me so after every time I introduce a character, I will have to get back to their little brief introduction. So when I introduce you the character Mr. Lockwood, I told something about him. So it's quite common it happens, because I can't simply say that Mr. Lockwood and Heathcliff and Catherine, isn't it? So but you should be very authentic, you should be very vigilant in terms of listening my lecture. So what happened? You're getting, yes, fine, you're all getting it, okay. And then I'll introduce you the character first. There was a character called, I'll introduce you all. No, it's wonderful, no confusion you're saying. So I'll introduce you all minor and the major characters, and later on I get into the important events. So here there is a character called Joseph. Joseph is a servant at Uddering Heights for 60 years. How many years? Yes, sir, the name is too difficult to keep in mind. Okay, yes, it's yes, true. But do one thing: you reread the text. You reread the text, and you understand the narration. I think there will be no difficulty in terms of understanding the names. Okay, but you take down immediately, so that when you take down the names, you will be able to it will be easier for you to understand when I describe them. So the first character is Joseph. He is a servant at Uddering Heights for 60 years. Okay, fine. And next we have a Mr. Lockwood. Okay, you're giving expressions of more than the words to understand. Okay, Arish. Okay, nice. So what happened? Mr. Lockwood, he narrates the book until chapter 4. So until chapter 4, he narrates the whole story. His experiences, he came to see Mr. Heathcliff. He did not see him, but he stayed there in the house. And unknowingly, he went inside the Catherine's house, and he experiences the ghost of Catherine, and he bit worried, and he documents in his diary, and he started writing the diary. Okay, it's an incompleted diary, and after that he shifted over to Tuscas Grange, because that house is vacant now. Because Heathcliff will never let anyone to enter to this house, because this is a house where he spent his time with Catherine. He loves Catherine so much. Such a very platonic love. It's a wild, the passion and all. There are a lot more to express about this character. Very complex character. So every time I read the novel, I get different ideas. So this is a big, probably you might have also heard this novel. It's a very complex novel in terms of expressing the feelings, passions, and the narrative techniques, in terms of intricates between the bondages, between the relationships and everything. Ultimately, it's between the class consciousness. And until chapter 4, when the main narrator Nellie picks up the tale. So after chapter 5th, Nellie she picks up the tale. And after that, we have the next character is the Francis. The Francis is a Mr. and Mrs. Ansha. Frances, she's a wife of, Frances, she's a wife of Hindley. Frances, she's a wife of Hindley. And you just listen to the characters. I'll tell you the major characters. I press about my major characters, reiterate about the major characters. And then, so Frances, she's a wife of, Mr. Hindley. Yes, Hindley. And then we have Mr. and Mrs. Ansha, the head of the families of Uddering Heights, and we have Mr. and Mrs. Linton. They're the members of Tuscas Grange, and they led a very sophisticated life. Who? Mr. Linton and Mrs. Linton, they led a very sophisticated life, because that house is symbolically portrayed a life of sophistication, the life of meaningful, the life of high class, the life of very standardized, the life of following all the religion, puritanic values. Tumba strict norms na follow ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಈಗ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಲ್ಲ, they follow the rules and regulations. Very strict family and then. So Tuscas Grange families is like that. Everybody is so humble. For example, Edgar Linton, who marries Catherine later on, and he's a very modest person, very humble, very modest, and he doesn't always stand on his toes to quarrel with people. He doesn't quarrel with people. Okay, he's a very soft and humble person. And whereas his sister, that is Isabella, is also very, very soft and kind, but unknowingly she trapped by the beauties of Heathcliff, and somehow she fell in love with Heathcliff gradually and married him, and her life became very pathetic indeed. So here, Tuska's Grange people are very mild, very humble, and very, very innocent. Whereas if you look at the Wuthering Heights, Hindley is always horror. Whereas he always fights with the Heathcliff. He beats him, touches him, and brutalizes him. This house symbolically portrayed for violence, and whereas Tuska's Grange is symbolically portrayed for innocence. And then, so what happened? So Mr. And Mrs. Linton at Tuska's Grange, they led a sophisticated life, a very educated children also. They have studied well. Whereas if you look at here, Hindley, he's gambling, indulging in gambling. And whereas he always there with the gambling and drinking, and the property is deteriorating, the kind of a wild life they led. But whereas here the life is entirely different from, isn't it? And then we have another important character, Zillah. Zillah is also a servant at Wuthering Heights. And we have a person called Mr. Green. He's a lawyer, helps to Heathcliff to inherit the Grange as his property. So the Green, he's a person who helped Mr. Heathcliff to get the properties of the Tuska's Grange after everybody dies in the family. After Isabella dies, after Linton dies, Edgar Linton dies, after Isabella dies, and he's become a custodian of that Tuska's Grange. And now we are here, the important character, our Heathcliff. Heathcliff, he found on the streets of Liverpool, important character, keep it in your mind. He found on the streets of Liverpool and on the street ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿಕ್ಕದಂತ ಹುಡುಗ ಇವನು ಯಾರು Heathcliff. He and Catherine grow closer, and love is a central theme. They become closer one after another, and they become very closer. A platonic love developed between them. They fell in love with one another. So love is a major theme in the novel. The property and the class concept is one of the issues, and whereas the theme of love is another important issues here. And his revenge against Hindley, and here further, Heathcliff, he started revenge against the Hindley because Hindley tortures him so much, and also Edgar. He also take Edgar Linton as a enemy because Edgar Linton, he marries his life, that is Catherine, and this is the character. And next character is Catherine Earnshaw. So introduced to the reader after her death. When she was introduced to the reader only after death, in the chapter 5 only, the Nelly she introduces the characters. Look at that, I was in the house and all that. So when the novel opens, many characters are died. They are not at all here. Okay, so when you talk about the Uddering Writes, who are the characters? We have Hindley, Catherine, and then we have Heathcliff. And when we talk about Tuska's Grange, we have Edgar Linton, Isabella Linton, and the servants. And after their generation, the first generations is Mr. Earnshaw and Mrs. Earnshaw. Here, the Mr. Linton and Mrs. Linton. And the second generation is Mr. Hindley and Catherine, and along with Heathcliff. And here, Mr. Edgar Linton and Miss Isabella Linton and their generations. Okay, when the novel starts, they are in the third generation. The first generation is collapsed. In the second generations, many people have died, like Catherine, Edgar Linton, and the Hindley died, and only Heathcliff is here. And along with the third generations. So that is, generations is a very, very significant portraiture in this novel. And we have Catherine Earnshaw introduced to the reader after her death through the Lockwood's diary. Lockwood discovers her diary here, and Lockwood fine day it discovers in the house of Uddering Writes that this character, that is, Catherine, she is happy of writing a diary. Through her diary only, he understood the entire life story of Catherine, Lockwood. And Catherine, she talks about everybody. She talks about how Heathcliff entered into the life of this character and many other concepts. So here, Lockwood discovers of her diary, and critics say that her decision to marry Edgar is allegorically a rejection of nature and a surrender to a culture. It's a very important criticism. What is that? Why Catherine Linton, she did not marry Heathcliff? ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಏನಪ್ಪ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ critics ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, they say that her decision to marry Edgar is allegorically a rejection of nature and a surrender to culture. Because Edgar Linton is a sophisticated, she married him. He is civilized. she married him. He's educated, she married him. He's as a property, she married him. And he's a man of wealthy, and she married him because the society did not allow, and she reject the true love of Hitler. So that indicates that allegorically rejections of a nature. Love another, we say love for a law. Some pronounce it in a different way. The love or a love. So some see the love itself. It's against the love itself is a nature. It just happens. So here, Catherine, she rejects the nature. Can we go against the nature? No, we cannot. And this is true in terms of Platonic understanding. Love anta others anta banದಾಗ ಈ ಮಾತು ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. But this is a mundane life, because ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೇಳಿದೆ, these characters are very down to earth even to the current situation, current scenario. And she against the nature, and she surrendered to the culture. And she surrendered herself to the culture means what? Expecting this kind of economic stability. That is important. It could be economic stability, or it can terms status which matter. So dear learners, it's a time of 11:30. I can't keep you in abeyance, because other professor will be waiting for you. I introduce only 2 characters, and there are many important character we introduces. And I'll do one thing to be introduced. I'll do one thing, and noon I have a class. Let me see, possible I completes the novel in the noon. Otherwise we can also little bit extend for the next class. I try to complete this text within an hour, because tomorrow I can get into the last paper, because I've taught you the first paper, and second paper sir will handle. So third paper I've taught you restoration, repethlog, and other paper. And today I'm dealing with the 4 paper. Tomorrow possible I just take 1 or 2 texts from the paper 5, so that I'll give a justice to within these 5 days. So I leave the session now, and thank you. I'll meet you again in the noon. Okay, thank you. I'm going to leave the studio, so other professor will get into.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Are you there? I welcome you all for the second session of this fourth day's contact program, online contact classes we are having. Coming to today's class, dear students, I'll be dealing with one more text from the paper called Shakespeare. So today I'll be dealing with one historical play called Richard II. Now, Shakespeare has written so many historical plays, including Edward III, Henry IV, Richard III, Richard II. There are so many, at least 8 historical plays that you can see in the list of Shakespearean plays. So there are 8 historical plays. So among them, Richard II is one of the significant plays that has been prescribed for you in the syllabus. Now, I do feel this particular play is very, very interesting. You can, if you read this play, you come to know about the various traits of the modern day rulers or the leaders. You have seen so many leaders or the rulers across the world who have got different traits, different uncanny behaviors, isn't it? Uncanny behaviors. So in that way, Richard II is also very, very interesting. It comes, you can keep this character as a you can compare this character to any modern day ruler. You can just use it in the current situation, and you can make a reading of this play, keeping the plot of this play into the current situation. Coming to this particular play, as I told you, he has written 8 important historical plays, and this particular play is one among that. And now he borrows materials for his historical plays from Raphael Olinshed's The Chronicles of Scotland, the Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland. Okay, again, the Chronicles of Kings from England, Scotland, and Ireland. So he borrows materials from that book, which was written by Raphael Olinshed, which got published in the year 1586-87. The same duration when again Shakespeare was alive. Okay, during the same tenure, same period. Now, this particular play is very significant because, as I told you, you have seen, so you have been witnessing so many leaders in the present day leaders. You can compare them with those with the historical characters that comes in this play. As I told you, King Richard II. It's a play about family feud, FEUD feud. Means it's a fight, family fight, domestic fight for power. You have a king called Richard II, who shares the same royal lineage of British Royal Empire. He belongs to the same dynasty, the Royal British Empire. He lived during the 14th century. He lived during 14th century. He lived hardly for 30 odd years, probably for 32 years. When he was born in the year 1367. He was born in the year 1367, but he came to power at a very young age. At a very young age. So he came to power when he was only 10 years old. He became the king of England in the year 1377. 1377. He was born in 1367. He became the king of England in 1377. There is a reason for that. Why he came to power all of a sudden? Like the reason behind it is like his father, that is Edward III, was drowned in the British Channel when he was swimming in the British Channel. In that British Channel means the sea that separates England from France, isn't it? So that is called as British Channel. So when he was swimming in the British Channel, Edward III was drowned in the sea. So that is the reason why he came to again. He became the king at the very young age. He came to power at the very young age. Only when he was 10 years old. Only when he was 10 years old. That doesn't mean that there were no successors. There were no successors in the same family. There were successors. There were eligible and abled princes. Again, so many princes waiting to be the kings. If you read the history of Saudi kings, Saudi Arabia's royal dynasty, the royal kingdom of Saudi Arabia, has got so many family members who are eligible to be the kings, to be the prince of Saudi Arabia. But it is the present prince who is called as Mohammed bin Salman. Mohammed bin Salman is considered as the future head of the state, isn't it? Is considered as the future head of the state. He has kept all the other princes, eligible princes, aside. Means he has kept them in prison. You mean to say prison in the sense like house imprisonment. They call that as house imprisonment. So usually it happens. Whoever is powerful, whoever is efficient, whoever is mightier or strong enough, so psychologically and also physically, will always succeed. Will always come to power. So this is not the case in a democratic setup. In a democratic setup, you need public mandate, right? You need public mandate, public support in elections. Then only you can come to power. Then only you can become a leader. But whereas in this play, Richard didn't have any of the leadership qualities. Any of the leadership qualities. See, I'm dealing with the text from the paper Shakespeare, course 2, Richard 2. Got it? Don't be confused. I hope my voice can be my voice can be heard. Like it is audible. I hope so. I hope you can hear me. Huh? Can you hear me? Is it audible? My voice is audible, isn't it? Someone states that voice not again. Someone has commented that voice not audible clearly, sir. See, I can't tell for the technical problem that you might be facing. See, most of the students, I think they can hear me. They can hear me, and they are, again, my voice is audible to them. I hope so. So coming to this text, as I told you, he came to power. Means all of a sudden he came to power in the year 1377 at a very young age. Now, again, he is considered even now in the history of the royal dynasty of England as the most handsomest king. He was the most handsomest king of, like, compared to all the other kings of England. He probably Shakespeare might have seen his portrait or image somewhere hanging in the Buckingham Palace. Okay, that is the reason why that is the reason why he has portrayed this king as the most handsomest king. Like, he's very very handsome when it comes to physical appearance, very very poetic, very very emotional, sensitive, very very sensitive, emotional. At the same time, a spendthrift. He is extravagant. He is extravagant, a spendthrift, and self-centered personality. He is a self-centered king. He thinks a lot about himself. He spends public money lavishly. He spends public money lavishly for his own purpose. He collects huge taxes from public. He collects huge taxes from public for his own personal cause. For his own personal cause. As I told you, Richard is all powerful. In the sense, like, Richard believed that he is God's deputy on earth. There is a belief. There is a belief in England that whomsoever is born from in the British royal dynasty, they are they are God's children. They are considered as God's children. God's children. And normally, the king whomsoever becomes the king of England is considered as the a king who is appointed by the Lord or God Himself, the God or the Lord Himself. That is the reason why you don't find anybody trying to overthrow or overthrow or usurp or to remove or to kill. Nobody dares to kill someone who is in the position of a king in British royal family. That is the reason, because people in England, there is an emotional feeling, there is a sentimental feeling, a kind of attachment. So you see, apart from the Prime Minister England, who heads the nation? Who heads the nation in England? It is the head of the royal British family. The present head of England is Elizabeth II, isn't it? Elizabeth II. In that way, there is a kind of, you cannot call it as a blind belief or a superstitious belief, but still, people or the public in England feel that whomsoever becomes the king of England is none other than is directly appointed by the Lord Himself. The God Himself is a direct appointee or the representative of God Himself on earth. That is what people think of. That is the reason why that is the reason why King Richard always felt that since he is God's deputy on earth, so he is all powerful. He is all powerful. He believed that king has the divine right to rule, being the God's deputy on earth, So at the same time, he is, as I told you, he is surrounded by psychopaths. Psychopaths means Ogadu Bhattaru. They call it as Ogadu. In Kannada, you call them as Ogadu Bhattaru. There are two characters like Bushy and Green. Ogadu Bhattaru. In those days, people used to kings used to have these psychopaths around them, and psychopaths used to always praise king like anything. They used to praise the valor or the energy, the physical energy, or whatever it is. Again, they used to call them as, even though he's not mightier or strong enough to face anybody, not even like psychologically and also physically, people used to praise them, isn't it? So in those days, they used to keep these psychopaths in courtier in their royal courts, isn't it? So in the same way, Richard too had two psychopaths, who again they are none other than Bushy, the character called Bushy, 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 and you have Green, the other character called Green, who always used to flatter, Richard too. As again, at the same time, the problem is he has all the weakness of an average mortal. As an average mortal, he is like a common man. He has got all the weaker qualities of a common man. He's an average mortal. He's like an average mortal being. He's like a common layman. So he is not. He doesn't have the kingly qualities. The kingly. He may be having kingly appearance. Kingly appearance is different from kingly qualities. You need to have those qualities that is the qualities that are eligible to call you as king. But as I told you, he had the problem with this character, the King Richard II, is that he had all the weaknesses of an average mortal. He's not fit to fulfill. He's not fulfill the massive role of a king. He's not fulfill. He's not fit to fulfill the massive role of a king. Massive role of a king imposed on him by destiny. As I told you, again, it was imposed on him by destiny. He becomes king at a very young age due to destiny. As I told you, at the age of 10 years, he becomes the king of England. So due to destiny, because his father was killed, when he died in a mishap, sorry, at the time of swimming in the sea. So that makes him to become the king of England at a very young age. So again, he came to power all of a sudden, isn't it? There was no proper upbringing. At the same time, no proper training required to be a king. You need proper training proper training needed to be a king of England. You know, the present Prince of England, that is Charles. Charles has got two sons born with born from again Diana's womb. Diana's womb. Those two sons are called as Henry and Harry, isn't it? Harry, the younger one, is known for his bravery. He was, in fact, he was in Afghanistan fighting against Talibanis, who the younger son of Diana, or the present Prince of England, that is Charles, whose name is Harry. Okay, so again, this British family, the family members need to have certain qualities. To be a king. And as I told you, he always believed that since it is imposed upon him by force, when he was hanged, it was imposed upon him by force. And according to the critics, he was not fit to be called, fit to play the role of a king. He was not fit to play the role of a king. You should admire Shakespeare for one thing, because he is criticizing a royal member of British royal dynasty. He is criticizing an ancestor of Elizabeth I, who ruled England for a few years. So for that purpose, you should certainly admire the guts or the dareness of William Shakespeare, because he is acting as a critic here. He is criticizing one of the ancestor of royal British family who miserably failed in performing the role of kingship, In that way, we should certainly appreciate Shakespeare for that. And he's not fit to fulfill the role of king, as I told you. His kingly decisions are irrational and arbitrary. His kingly decisions. So King Richard takes some irrational decisions, like waging a war against the neighboring nation called Ireland. No, Ireland is very much next to England. You know that very well. And that battle against Ireland was not at all necessary. So war always means investment of you again, a lot of money. Okay, and at the same time, war means destruction. Destruction means causing damage on progress. A lot of money is invested on war, but this man, very very illogical, irrational. He tries to wage a war against the neighboring country called Ireland. That too with the public money. He wages huge tax on people to go on a war with Ireland. So he puts a lot of levy tax on people to go on a war against the neighboring country called Ireland. the neighboring country called Ireland, and people are not at all happy, not at all happy with his kingly decisions, with his kingly decisions. So his kingly decisions are irrational and arbitrary, arbitrary, Arbitray, arbitrary. At the same time, he ignores the ignores the advice of his uncle. He ignores the advice of his uncle called Old John Gaunt. Okay, there is an uncle. He has got three uncles. You know, he was born to Edward III. He has got three uncles who are also eligible, to become the kings. But he succeeds them, like he pushes them aside and becomes the king at a very young age. At a very young age. And there is an uncle called John Gaunt, okay, who again he advises him to take some rational decisions, being a king. But he miserably fails in that, and he digs his own grave by seizing Bolingbroke's. Well, there is a cousin called Henry Bolingbroke. Henry Bolingbroke is the cousin, Bolingbroke, Henry Henry. Henry Bolingbroke is none other than Henry IV. Henry IV is another character who is considered as the cousin of Richard II, and Shakespeare has written a play on Henry IV also. There is another play called Henry IV, where Henry IV becomes the king of England, and he enforces his decision. Whereas compared to his cousin Richard II, his cousin is eligible, very much able to be the king of England, very logical in his thinking. Moreover, he is loved by the mass. He is loved and admired by the mass or the public. People love him. That is the reason why he is people friendly. People love him. He mingles with the crowd, with the people, and naturally he emerges as the people's choice leader. He emerges as a people's choice leader or would be king for England. And Richard II visualizes or thinks that this man may become a threat to his position in future. That is the reason why he confiscates his property, and he does take all kind of wrong decisions in the play, result of which he was killed. So let us see what happens there. Again, at the same time, he feels that heredity and hierarchy were his sole arguments to retain his crown. He always felt that since he is the son of Edward III, so that hereditary seniority or hereditary passing of power, okay, and also hierarchy. Hierarchy means you use hierarchy when it comes to seniority, right? He felt that he is senior compared to other cousins and uncles. He has every right to be the king, and so what is Shakespeare's concern in this play? Shakespeare's concern with Richard is he is far more central than any other king in Shakespeare's historical plays, and at the same time he is very petulant, resentful, callous, and is prepared to plunder his finance on an Irish campaign. He is very careless, resentful, petulant, 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 resentful, callous means careless. At the same time, he is ready to plunder his finance or his money over the Irish campaign. So all he knows is that kings are so powerful, so they have right to loot. Or plunder public money. He accepts all the privileges, but ignores his sense of duty. That is very important. He accepts all the privileges that are attributed to a king, but at the same time he neglects he neglects his duties as a king, as a king. At the same time, we should not forget that this man is very, very romantic, very, very emotional, and very, very poetic. Do you think that these three things are enough to be an able king? Not at all. By being a poet, by being a musician or a romantic person, you can't think of ruling a nation. Can't think of ruling a nation. So what happens in the story is, you know, Richard too is involved in killing of one of his uncle, called Duke of Gloucester. Duke of Gloucester. Gloucester is a province. Duke means it's a position. It's a rank. It's a rank like governor we have in our country. So dukedom is like almost like governor. So Duke of Gloucester, again his own uncle, the elder uncle, so the elderly uncle to Richard too. So who had all the seniority or all the right to be the king. So what happens here is Richard too, with the help of one of his closest ally called Thomas Mowbray, Mowbray, Thomas Mowbray. With the help of Thomas Mowbray, he kills the Duke of Gloucester. He feels that he may become a threat crown, to his crown. So by the time the story opens, the first act, scene one opens. So by that time, he has already killed Duke of Gloucester, and there is a blame. People are blaming Thomas Mowbray for this, and Thomas Mowbray is brought in front of Richard II, and people are not aware that Richard II has got something to do with the killing. He has a hand. He has a hand in the killing of Duke of Gloucester. But Henry IV, that is Henry Bolingbroke, Richard II's own cousin, uncles, the second senior uncle's son. He has an uncle called Duke of Duke of Gaunt or Old Gaunt, John Gaunt, his uncle. So he is the son of John of Gaunt. So Henry Bolingbroke is fully aware that this man Richard II has got something to do. He has a hand. He has a hand in the killing of Duke of Gloucester. So he directly blames Thomas. He brings Thomas Mowbray before Richard II and asks Richard to punish punish this guy called Thomas Mowbray because he has an involvement in the killing of Duke of Gloucester. But Richard II, as I told you, is irrational, very irrational in taking decisions. Right from the beginning, instead of punishing Thomas Mowbray, what he does, he blames Henry IV, for creating problem. At the same time, he also asks Henry IV to have a fight with Thomas Mowbray on Saint Lambert's Day. So on that particular day, they should fight with each other through fencing. Fencing means Katti Varasat, and whomsoever is defeated is considered as the real culprit behind the killing of Duke of Gloucester. Don't you think that again it is very illogical decision or irrational decision or verdict? Yes, of course. So in that way, instead of sorting out the case immediately and by punishing Thomas Mowbray, what he does, because he cannot punish Thomas Mowbray because Thomas Mowbray is his close associate. What he does, he asks them to fight on that particular Saint Lambert's Day. So what happens on that day? When the fighting is going on, he intervenes. When he feels that Henry Bolingbroke is going to defeat Thomas Mowbray, when he's going to kill him, so what happens? Richard II intervenes and he asks them to stop. So they stop the fighting, and what he does, he takes another irrational decision. So what is that decision? He asks Thomas Mowbray to leave the nation and to go on exile, to a country called France, which is a neighboring country. So he wants him to be banished. He feels that if Thomas Mowbray is present in England, he may reveal the real cause of killing Duke of Gloucester. So keeping that in mind, somehow he has to get rid of Thomas Mowbray. So he banishes Thomas Mowbray to France for life, for life. So he has to go on exile. He has to go on exile for life, for life. Whereas at the same time, he also banishes his own cousin Henry Bolingbroke for almost 20 years, for almost 20 years, which is very, very harsh. Duke of Gaunt, that is John Gaunt, again, who is father of Henry IV, intervenes. He asks him to forgive him, and he in fact pleads with his nephew, Richard to forgive and to at least lessen his punishment. So what happens in the story? Again, Richard II not only bans or banishes Henry Bolingbroke's public movement. He has to live in disguise. He has to live in disguise. He should not mingle with the public. He should not mingle with the public. At the same time, Richard II has every right to seize his property. So these are the three harsh decisions that Richard II takes or takes on Henry Bolingbroke. So Henry Bolingbroke is very, very furious now. So there at this again in Act 2 you see John of Gaunt is sick, he is bedridden because he can't see this happening in England. So whereas his son is banished and his property is seized by his nephew, so you can see John of Gaunt, that is Richard II's uncle and Henry IV's father, is bedridden, and he asks Richard to reduce the punishment from at least from 20 years to at least to minimum 8 years at least. But what happens in the story is bad again. Though his banishment remains, the punishment is reduced. By the time Henry Bolingbroke returns to his castle, his father, that is John of God, is no more. He is died. He is dead. He is dead. So in that way, Henry Bolingbroke feels that Richard II is being harsh with him, and Henry Bolingbroke wants to take revenge against Richard II with his own cousin. So he forms his own army of people, army of able soldiers who can give a fitting reply to Richard II. Meanwhile, Richard II, to prove his strength, to prove his might, so what he does, he goes on a war against Ireland. As I told you, he spends public money, and for that he receives public wrath. People are angry. People are angry against Richard II for taking such decisions. So, as I told you, uh, he neglects all that. He compares himself to Jesus Christ. He compares himself to Jesus Christ, and as he says that since Jesus Christ has to face one Judas, let me give you the exact textual quotation. He says, in fact, he compares himself to Jesus Christ. Christ had to deal with only one Judas, only one Judas. He has to deal with many. He has to deal with many. So there are so many treacherers, so many conspirators who are plotting against him. That is what Richard II feels. So who is responsible for that? It is he himself. It is he himself. Look at this man. As I told you, is very, very poetic. So comparing himself to Jesus Christ is ridiculous. Jesus Christ is ridiculous, isn't it? So Richard II compares himself to Jesus Christ. He feels that Christ had to deal with only one Judas, only one Judas, he has to deal with many of them. We has to deal with many of them. So uh, at the same time, Shakespeare is trying to project him as the victim of circumstances. As the victim of circumstances, he enhances his suffering to erode our sympathy. To erode our sympathy, he rarely mentions his follies, his mistakes. As a reader or as a theater going audience, there is sympathy for this man, but you don't feel this play as a tragic play because this play is unable to, is not capable, this play is unable to arouse a kind of sympathy or pity towards this character. People don't feel pity or sympathetic towards Richard II when he dies. In that way, this play cannot be considered as a tragic play. Moreover, it's a historical play, just a historical play. So, as I told you, he's a good poet rather than a king. So what happens? Henry Bolingbroke comes back. He comes with the brave, energetic soldiers, group of soldiers, and he stands in front of the castle of castle of Elsinore, where Richard II stands at the top of the castle. He sees his cousin marching towards the castle. What he does, instead of waging a war against his cousin, he accepts a defeat. He accepts a defeat and sends a proposal, a deal, a treaty. So he invites Henry Bolingbroke for a talk, for a negotiation. He asks the religious heads of the state, and also the courtesans, means the courtiers to come and assist him, to have a deal with Henry IV. So there is an important scene called disposition scene where Richard II hands over the crown without shedding a drop of a blood. Without shedding a drop of a blood, he hands over the crown to his own cousin called Henry Bolingbroke. So called Henry Bolingbroke, very important, isn't it? So he's very, very weak. He's very, very weak. So he hardly fights with his cousin. He's very, very efficient when it comes to poetry. He's a good poet rather than a king. He is majestic despite kingly weakness. He has got some good qualities, some positive vibes, some positive characteristics. What are they? He is majestic despite kingly weaknesses. So he is good, but rather he is good poet rather than a king. He lacks moral and intellectual worth. He doesn't know how to differentiate between good and bad. There is another problem with this character. He is self-centered and extravagant. Extravagant, as I already told you. He bleeds his subject. Means people, citizen. He bleeds his subject dry when he wants money. Whenever he wants money, he is not ready to bother. He doesn't even bother to put heavy tax on his people, his subjects, as I already told you. He passes his time in vain pursuits. In vain pursuits means wasting time, okay, in vain pursuits without doing any, means without using time in a proper way. So there comes a time when divinity becomes a pain for his subject that cannot be endured any longer. So people considered Richard II as the divine representative on earth, but the same divinity or the divine representative on earth is no longer endurable. Endurable means ಸಹಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗದೇ ಇರುವಂತ ಒಂದು ಪರಿಸ್ಥಿತಿಗೆ ಜನಗಳು ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡ್ತಾರೆ. So they are no longer endurable. Means Richard II is no longer endurable, though he is considered as again God's deputy on earth. Again, means the dummy God on earth. People are no longer ready to sustain this pain or to undergo this pain. So even in the abstract name of God, he is an inefficient king. They may ask you a question in the exam. Consider Richard II as an inefficient king. As an inefficient king. Comment, comment on the theme of inefficiency in the kingship of Richard II. In the play Richard II. So for all these, for such questions, you should use these points. They may ask you a straightforward question to write on the kingly qualities, to write something on the kingly qualities of Richard II in the play Richard II. He's an inefficient king. He kills his nobles. He kills his nobles. Whoever loyal to him is killed by Richard II. Yeah, and burdens is subject with taxation. As I already told you, even yields his crown to Bolingbroke before formal demand is made. The formal demand is made for it. So before Henry Bolingbroke makes a formal demand for the crown, he hands over it. He is ready to dispose it. Okay. So for that, like that is the reason why disposition scene is very, very important, because in that scene also this man tries to be more a poet than an able administrator. An able administrator. He is not a man with good, or again, extempore, not a good orator, but a very good poet. He can write good poems. Even in India, our political history has got so many good leaders. Like there were people friendly presidents. There were presidents who stayed away from public gathering. There were presidents, prime ministers who mingled with the public, isn't it? So even in India, there were people friendly presidents, people friendly prime ministers. You can see so many leaders. There was a prime minister like Manmohan Singh who hardly spoke in public, but he was considered as the best economist in the world, isn't it? And at the same time, we had Atal Bihari Vajpayee, a good poet and an able administrator, isn't it? So in that way, we too had in India, we too had some able administrators, some leaders who had all such qualities like leadership. Some lacked such qualities, some certainly had such qualities. So you can differentiate, you can differentiate, you can judge. You are all matured enough to judge. So in that way, a country naturally needs an able administrator or an able leader to see progress in order to move forward in the path of progress, isn't it? Any country, let it be, if there is a failure in the leadership, that country will naturally become a banana republic. Will naturally become a banana republic, isn't it? In that way, England had not become banana republic during the time of Richard II, but if he had continued for a few more years, again England would have been into an anarchic state, into an anarchic state. It would have been a failed state or failed country, isn't it? So again, for that reason, Henry Bolingbroke, thinking about all this, he comes to know that there is this vacuum arising in England, vacuum in leadership, which is created by none other than Richard II himself. He himself is responsible for that. At the same time, he is too eager to hand over the charge to Bolingbroke so that he can indulge in his favorite passion of resentful suffering. So, in fact, when in that disposition scene, in fact, when he was asked to surrender and when he was sent to jail without retorting or without giving any kind of fitting reply, this man accepts the punishment. In fact, he is ready to go to prison. He's ready to go to prison so that there he can be a better poet. There he can be a better poet. He is irritating at the same time. This king is a irritating king. Very, very irritating for public and even for the royal members. He is a short-tempered king. He is a short-tempered king in the play and indulges in sudden outbursts of passion. He indulges in sudden outbursts of passions and can indulge in hate and anger. You can see he hates his cousins, his uncles. So he's ready to do anything for that. All in all, he is a weak king. So he's a man, an inconsequential king. He is an inconsequential consequential, inconsequential king. He was not a man who is fit to that particular means consequential. Inconsequential means who is not fit to be the king at that particular time. He is not a king who fits to that proper timing. The timing of this kingship is not at all right. It's not at all right. According so when it comes to the situation that England was facing during that time, he becoming a king was not at all good for the state. Okay, we sympathize with him because he is so lyrical. The play is not a tragedy because, as I told you, Richard too is not a great man. Shakespeare is very much aware of this, of his inherent weakness in history. He does not act heroically. Once he fathoms situation, he satiates his art. He satiates means satisfies his art. Once he fathoms, what? Fathoms the situation, he satiates, S-A-T-I-A-T-E-S, satiates his art. He satisfies his heart. You can call this man as an amateur king. Amateur king, dilettante king. Dilettante, Dilettante. Dilettante king means an amateur king. Amateur king who considers kingship as an amateur sport, like fasting means spending time leisurely, means who never considers kingship seriously. So he is a dilettante king. Dilettante king, Dilettante. Dilettante king means an amateur king. So self-satisfaction, self-gratification is a fatal instinct in him. Self-gratification is a fatal instinct in him. Shakespeare knows that prosperity is possible if the king is strong and powerful. So that is what Shakespeare is trying to achieve through this character called Richard II. So a nation can achieve prosperity or progress only when it is ruled by an able administrator. Only when it is ruled by an able administrator. Misery occurs if the king indulges in crimes. You know, there are so many dictators. The world history has witnessed. There were so many dictators. There was Gaddafi in Libya. There was Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And even you have Kim Jong-un in North Korea, the present dictator of North Korea, who is the third successor of the same family who is ruling North Korea. North Korea, liberated from South Korea, became a separate country, and you can see the atrocities or the kind of public harassment that is happening in North Korea. North Korea, because of his, you can compare Kim Jong-un with Richard II, but Kim Jong-un is not less daring or not a weak ruler. That is another significant factor. Kim Jong-un can threaten a country like America, with its nuclear arsenals, So keeping that in mind, so as I told you, you can compare any ruler, modern day ruler, with Richard II. So Shakespeare knows that the prosperity of a nation is possible if the king is strong and powerful and efficient. Okay, misery occurs if the king indulges in crimes. This is another important factor. So, what about Henry Bolingbroke? Henry is Richard's contemporary. This man has got all the noble qualities. Even at the time when Richard II is killed at the end of the play, in Act 5, Richard II is killed by the loyal friend of Henry IV. Richard II is killed by the loyal friend of Henry IV, whose name is Exton, E-X-T-O-N. Exton is the loyal friend. In order to appease, in order to show his loyalty, in order to get some reward from Henry IV, what he does, he goes to prison and kills Richard II. He beheads him. He cuts his body into two pieces. He removes his head from his body. He beheads Richard II, which makes Henry IV more remorseful. Means he feels that Henry IV, in fact, takes the path of spirituality or religious. He goes on a religious pilgrimage journey. He takes the path of religious. He takes religious path. He goes on a religious or the pilgrimage journey to the holy land called Jerusalem. Jerusalem is located in modern day Israel, and uh, which is very important for three religions. That is for Jews and for Islam and also for Christians. Very important place, Jerusalem. Jerusalem. This man Henry IV goes on a pilgrimage journey at the end of the play. The reason is because he feels that he is responsible for the killing of Richard II. Because without his knowledge, Exton, his loyal friend, is a close associate, has killed Richard II, his cousin. So he feels pathetic, he feels bad about himself. So for what purpose he gained this kingship is not justifiable for him now. Because the reason is, again, he himself indirectly is the cause for the killing of Henry IV. This is what he says, sorry, Richard II, for the cause of killing Richard II. So this is what he says to Exton. When Exton comes there to bringing the head of Richard II, when he beheads him, when he brings his head, they love not poison that to do poison need not do I thee. Though I did, though I did wish him dead, I hate the murderer, love him murdered. The guilt of conscience, take thou for thy labor, but neither my good word, nor princely favor, with Cain go wander through shades of night, and never show thy head by day nor light. So he doesn't want to see Exton's head. Like, I don't want to see your face. It means go, means move off, means move away from me. I don't want to see your face. As I told you, Henry IV is natural, very natural. It means in his characteristic, in his behavior, is a natural choice for kingship. Is a natural choice for kingship. In comparison, they may ask you a question to compare and contrast Richard II with Henry IV. So this man is very pragmatic. Is a natural choice of public. Is a natural choice of public for kingship. Is very pragmatic, very honest, and very sensitive. Very sensitive. That is the reason why when he sees the head of Richard II, he moans, he suffers a lot. He could not control his what his emotions. So at the beginning he was just a reluctant rebel. At the beginning of the play, you find again Henry IV as a reluctant rebel who doesn't want to take any kind of risk because his own cousin Richard is heading the state, so he doesn't want to do any kind of mischief. But still, since Richard II considers him as a threat to his crown, he indulges in all kind of criminal activities that tempts that kind of act by Richard II tempts Henry IV to take such necessary steps, to go against his own cousin. He learns quickly that the crown he wears is full of what worries. Is full of worries. So people always feel that if one comes to power, you can enjoy the power. You can enjoy the power like anything. But usually, people who are in power will be feeling the heat. Will be feeling the heat because you can't sort out. There are so many problems in the society. You can't sort out all the problems. You can't give again. You can't sort out all the problems of public, isn't it? In the same way, Henry feels that as soon as he wears the crown, he feels that it's a crown which is completely filled with worries. Okay, he learns quickly that the crown he wears is filled with worries. It lowers him down to the center of domestic squabble. It lowers him to the center of domestic squabble or fight with the cousin. At the same time, he goes on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. That's another important factor that itself reveals that Henry is very sensitive. He is not the hero of the play. He is not the hero of the play, but later he becomes the hero of another play called Henry IV. Henry IV. He accomplishes things without hassles, without any effort or hassles, without any difficulty. He accomplishes he accomplishes things without any difficulty. He does not direct events. He does not direct any event in the play. Everything falls to him by luck. He does not direct any event, including crown. The crown falls on his lap. The crown that Richard II wears falls on his lap. Without any efforts, he gets the crownship or the kingship. Isn't it? The crown or the kingship, sorry. At the same time, he is adroit, ADROIT, adroit and cool. He's very, very adroit and cool. I want you to use the same words. Use the same words in the exam. If you are comparing Richard II with Henry, you have to use the same words. He's very, very adroit. He's adroit and cool. He has all the qualities of a king. He's very, very patriotic. That is what is required. If you want to be a king of a particular country, if you want to be an able administrator or a leader, you should develop this primary quality. What is that quality? You should be very, very patriotic. There is a difference between chauvinism and patriotism. Chauvinism means excessive love towards one's country, but patriotism means having love or respect towards one's country. If you want to be a leader, you need to develop this quality of patriotism. You have to. It has to be inherent quality. It has to be within. It has to be within. So Henry Bolingbroke is naturally a patriotic son of England. So that is the reason why people love him. People love him. He has a vision or a plan for his country. So people have huge respect for him. He is very patriotic. He is a crafty politician. Above all, he is a crafty politician. He is a crafty politician. Who is called as crafty politician? Politician, one who acquires the knowledge of maneuvering public opinion. One who has the ability to change the public opinion. One who has the ability to pull the mass towards you, isn't it? So a crafty politician, he has all the ability to pull the mass towards him. At the same time, he is very, very cautious, discreet while dealing with people. Very, very discreet. DISCREET. Discreet when he's dealing with the people. When he's dealing with the people, very, very cautious and patient. At the same time, he upturns Richard's divine right to rule without directing onto himself the wrath of the people. He knows how to win the hearts of the people. That's very, very interesting. He's fully aware that since I told you, he is sensitive. He is sensitive and emotional. That is the reason why he is very, very close to people. He knows how to win their heart. So he feels the crowd is trusted on him. Instead, he had never desired for it in the disposition scene. In the disposition scene, he reveals that he was not at all behind the crownship. He was not at all behind the kingship. So it was forcefully put forcefully handed over to him. He feels that the crown is trusted. Trusted means to impose something on with force. The crownship is trusted on him. Instead, he had never desired for it. That is what he reveals in the disposition scene. So he knows his mind. Again, at the same time, his tone is direct and plain. He knows how to speak, what to speak with the people. But whereas Richard exaggerates everything. So you have another character called Isabella, wife of Richard II. So her role is very, very important. She is the daughter of the King of France. She is the daughter of the King of France, who is married to Richard II. So once Richard II dies, she elopes. She goes to France to her maternal home. Okay, she represents what Isabella represents. She is a devoted wife. Shakespeare makes Isabella appear older in the play. She is a very courteous woman, courageous and fortitude, Fortitude, a loving and sincere wife, Her annoyance with Richard's timidity. She is annoyed with Richard's timidity, soft-heartedness, or very careless behavior, or you can say. So, some of the important questions that may arise in the exam is comment on the plot and structure of the play, Richard too. So I think I'm running out of the time. Uh, these important questions. Yes, is Exton also banished? Yes, Exton was also banished. Banished. Uh, I'll continue in the next class. So I have got few questions uh, for few questions for you to dictate. So what I do is I'll continue the next class. So I'll give you a few questions on this text. Next one I move to the other text. I hope you have enjoyed this lecture on Richard too, and I hope it was audible and useful for you. Meet you once again at 3 p.m. Thank you one and all.
Good afternoon, everyone. And today I'm going to talk about a very well established and it can be considered as a very classic in the history of English literature. Today I'm going to talk about a novel which you all going to enjoy it by listening to it. Now, good afternoon, everyone. If you have, hope I'm audible enough today. Uh, and again, I expect that no network issue will pop up in between our lecture or discussion. And the topic of my today's discussion is the novel written by Jane Austen, Emma. Okay, Emma. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Emma, this is a fourth novel by Jane Austen, published in 3 volumes. Hope I am audible enough. Right? Yeah, good afternoon. And if you have any doubts, you can what drop me a message in chat box so that at the end of my lecture I'll try to address your queries. And even yesterday I dropped you a message saying that if you have any doubts or clarification regarding the text or the poems we have covered or taught so far, and we can try to, especially I'm trying to solve your problems. And this session particularly I'm going to talk about Jane Austen novel Emma. Hope I am clear. Yeah, I have not yet started my lecture. I'll raise my voice, don't worry. This is a novel, this is a fourth novel by Jane Austen, published in 3 volumes and which was published in 1815. Set in Highbury, England, in the early 19th century, the novel centers on the central character, Emma Woodhouse, a female character protagonist of this novel. And she is a precocious young lady, very beautiful, pretty, cute, um, but a little spoiled lady. Okay, I'll tell you. The writer herself, Jane Austen, she is a female writer, novelist, and she herself writes in the beginning of the novel, and even she herself she herself introduces this character in a very interesting way, like how, according to the narrator, the central character is like Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever, and rich, with a comfortable home and happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. See, this is how the author introduces the character. See, I'm concentrating on the last sentence. She says that when the novel opens, the central character, Emma Woodhouse, is of 21 years old. Hope I am audible enough. Hope you're all following me. Yeah, Emma. This is a novel written by Jane Austen. Okay, very well-known novel, and which got her name, fame, everything. Let me come back to the novel. See, this is a novel about a precocious young woman whose misplaced confidence, sometimes maybe because of her overconfidence in her matchmaking abilities or business, occasions several romantic misadventures. Very interesting novels. Simple language has been used, and you all liked it when you go through this novel. Emma's introduction of the character Emma Woodhouse, her actual name is, among the most famous in the history of fiction because the writer or the novelist herself, she introduces in very interesting, enticing manner. And the force of the verb seemed is very pointed here. And Emma is indeed beautiful, wealthy, and smart. Okay, because I told you. And how does the author introduces this character? Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever, and rich. Okay, so this is how we get introduced to the central character. The force of the verb seemed very interesting, pointed, and obviously we all should agree with this novelist only when we go through the novel that, of course, the central character is indeed beautiful, wealthy, and smart, but little spoiled with her overconfidence. However, she is also spoiled, meddlesome, and self deluded. And although she is convinced she will never marry, okay, she doesn't want to marry, but Emma believes she is an excellent matchmaker. Okay, she doesn't want to marry anyone, but she feels very happy and contented in finding match for others. As she tells her father, Henry Woodhouse, okay, her father name is Henry Woodhouse. She says that her dear friend Mr. Knightley, she practically arranged a recent marriage between her former governess, her name is Miss Taylor, and the widower Mr. Weston. Only because of this marriage, and she becomes successful, and she thinks that I am a good matchmaker or I am an excellent matchmaker. And maybe her that overconfidence, and it starts or it started growing or aggravating in her like this. And after the successful matchmaking, matchmaking of Miss Taylor, her former governess, and the widower, you know the meaning of widower, Mr. Weston. And she did it after all to introduce them. Got it? And after such a clear success, Emma is determined to make another match. This time she has set her sights on the village vicar, Mr. Elton. And she has a very good friend, Miss Harriet Smith, and she is an orphan. But she wanted to do, Emma belongs to upper classes of the society, where the I hope you're all familiar. Where does this novel situate or take place? It sets in the village called Highbury. Got it? Highbury society we are talking about. You should all know what kind of, as I told you in my previous lectures, that and how do we have caste consciousness or uh, caste conflict here in the Indian society, and in European countries we have class conflict. So Emma, she belongs to upper class, whereas this Harriet Smith, um, she is very, what I can say, timid, and uh, though she is not as pretty as Emma, but still she is completely relying on Emma for each and everything. So Emma wanted to give her a good fortune or good future. How? Because she wanted to get her friend Harriet Smith a good match. So ultimately, or she has set her eyes on the village vicar, Mr. Elton. Vicar means chief. He also belongs to the upper class. So both Emma's father and Mr. Knightley, he is also one of the important characters who plays a major role in the novel. Both of them, both her father and Mr. Knightley, caution her against interfering, but they ultimately fail to dissuade her. And it was very difficult to convince Emma. And shortly thereafter, Emma friends, what her close friend Harriet Smith, a 17-year-old girl, hope I'm audible. Yeah. A 17-year-old girl at a local boarding school, and she wants to give her, and she wanted to be a very good friend, and she wanted to be intimate with her. And later we could find a very good rapport between them, Emma and Harriet Smith. And Harriet's parentage is unknown throughout the novel. Later we come to know at the end of the novel that she was born to a man, he was completely marginalized from the society, social structure. And she is Harriet Smith has been described by the author like she is the natural daughter of somebody. Okay, somebody means her parentage is unknown. Hope you understand what I am saying. So this is how the writer or a novelist introduces this poor girl, very dumbo, we can say dumb girl, in this manner. She is the natural daughter of somebody who many years ago placed her in the care of the school's headmistress, Mrs. Goddard. Like Dickens or like Shakespeare, even Jane Austen, she used to portray or create many characters in her novel. And even minor characters, we have many minor characters as well as major characters. I hope you're all thorough with the major characters on whom I have talked a bit in the introduction of this novel. To begin with, Emma Woodhouse, the central character. Second, Mr. Knightley, Harriet Smith, her friend. Got it so far? You should be thorough with two to three important characters: Emma, Mr. Knightley, Harriet Smith. Then, and how Mrs. Goddard, she was the caretaker of Harriet when she was small. And despite the obscurity of her birth and her perceived inferior social status, Emma decides that Harriet is a perfect match for Mr. Elton. Okay, though our heroine is of a class conscious woman or a lady, but still somewhere we could find a very interesting part in her or characteristic in her, because though she doesn't want to get married, but still she wants to give up a better life for Harriet Smith after she comes to know that she is an orphan girl. Got it? And then she decides that she comes to the conclusion on her own that Mr. Elton is a perfect match for Harriet. And Emma sets about improving her friend first by discouraging her interest in Robert Martin, a young farmer whose family is renting land from Mr. Knightley. Actually, Robert Martin is a minor character, but this is a very young and energetic boy, handsome boy, but he belongs to uh, the farmer family, as you all know. So even socially, or his class is very low. Got it? That's why Emma, she doesn't want Harriet to say yes to Martin's proposal. And Harriet clearly has feeling for Robert Martin. Only we readers know that. And even Mr. Knightley also, we can consider him as a very sensible character throughout the novel. Even he knows actually Robert Martin, not Mr. Elton, is the perfect match for Harriet Smith. Hope you're all following all the characters. Then Emma convinces Harriet Smith, and she tells her that Robert is beneath her. Got it? So when Robert writes a letter asking for her hand in marriage, Harriet, with Emma's counsel, refuses him. That's what in the beginning itself I told you. Harriet, she is very dumb and not independent girl. After she becomes closer with Emma, she has become completely reliant on Emma, and for each and everything she used to get consent from Emma, even for her personal life. The matter belongs to her personal life or professional, whatever. Then, when Mr. Knightley visits Emma, he excitedly tells her about Robert's intent to marry Harriet. And after Emma informs him that Harriet has already rejected Robert's proposal with her help, who had guided Harriet to reject that proposal, Emma herself. But she doesn't want to take that blame. Instead, she says, she herself is not interested in Robert Martin. So Mr. Knightley, he gets really furious, and he becomes very furious, and he criticizes Emma for interfering and in her personal life, and claiming Robert is a respectable man and a good match for Harriet. And throughout the novel, we could find a tug of war between Mr. Knightley and Emma. But at the end of the novel, we get a very what sudden twist in the novel. Later, I'll tell you. And he hope anyone has read this novel. Anyone? Oh, am I fast? Okay, I'll slow down, don't worry. And so far, I was talking about Emma. Okay, Emma, important character, Mr. Knightley, and Emma was she is 21 years old when the novel opens. Then she is very pretty, attractive, beauty, but not with brain. Of course, she's little or spoiled woman because of her overconfidence. Hope you're all you have followed this. And though she belongs to upper class, she wanted to give a better future or better life for Harriet Smith because she is an upper woman and she knows the difficulties in the society, how being a single lady and how a single lady should face many hurdles in her life to survive in the society, that all alone. So next, when the time she decides to give a better future for Harriet, her eyes sets on the local chief or a boy uh, who is also quite handsome and more than his features, and she gives more preference for what money and status, and obviously social status and money is which form the central theme of the novel. Got it? Yeah. Then you might be thorough with this novel, and that's what I'm giving you a summary in a nutshell form. And when Mr. Knightley tells her that why did you interfere in their matter, and actually Robert, though he is a farmer, young farmer, but actually he is the exact and perfect Mr. Perfect for who? Harriet Smith. But do you think our lady listens to him? Or do you think our heroine listens to his advice? No. And Emma, she is somewhere very adamant, audacious, and very stubborn woman. She doesn't want to listen to anyone because she thinks that she is an excellent matchmaker and she knows who is who and what is what. So he criticized for always, as I told you, that there is a tug of war between these two characters, Emma and Mr. Knightley, because she thinks in a very childish way, and she is not at all matured as Mr. Knightley. Then Emma continues. He doesn't visit Emma again for some time because Mr. Knightley he gets furious and he doesn't want to visit to Emma because he is also a relative of Emma. How? Because Emma has a sister, elder sister. Okay, she got married to Mr. Knightley's younger brother. Got it? When the novel opens, Knightley is about 37 years old, where Emma is about 21 years old. So they are relatives as well. Emma continues to push Harriet and Mr. Elton together with Robert out of the way, and Harriet and Mr. Elton spending more and more time together, thinking that Emma is interested in him, but actually wrong. And why does Emma want Elton to visit her? Because indirectly she thinks that she can make a match between Mr. Elton and Harriet. Hope you're following me. Yeah, Emma, then later what happens? Emma begins to celebrate the success of her endeavor, thinking that Mr. Elton is behind Harriet. Okay, but all seems to be going well until Christmas Eve when Mr. Elton reveals to Emma that he is in love with her, means Emma, not Harriet. Okay, not with Harriet, and he has been spending time with Harriet only to please Emma, not to please Harriet, and humiliated by her attempt to pair him with Harriet. And about Mr. Elton, especially, sorry, with Harriet, Mr. Elton resolves to retire to other place. It's called the place called Bath, and the same place. Where did I mention? While I was explaining the novel Mall Flanders. Okay, even Mall visited that place, no, which is famous for and which is considered as an industrial hub, right? Yeah. And then Emma is forced to tell Harriet about Mr. Elton and spends the next several days consoling her. Then, meanwhile, two new visitors arrive in Highbury. See, the place is very important, Highbury. Let me spell it out, Highbury. So, this is the place where the whole novel set. Okay, where it sets. Then again, we have a new visitors to Highbury because one is Jane Fairfax, another major character, and she is very beautiful orphaned niece of Emma's neighbor, Miss Bates. And Frank Churchill, another important character, the dashing young son of Mr. Weston, and whom we met in the first chapter itself, Mr. Weston. Okay, because Emma gets, she becomes successful only by making match between Mr. Weston and Miss Taylor, her governess, right? So initially, Emma dislikes Jane. Why? Because she is not only a beautiful woman but also brain, beauty with brain. So it's quite common, no, to have jealous about other women and the two equal, who especially who has all the qualities, equal features, what qualities and capabilities like what we have. So initially, Emma dislikes Jane and she condemns her for being too cold always and too cautious. Okay, she says, and even our novelist, she mentions this term while explaining or portraying the character Jane Fairfax. Am I fast or am I slow? Yeah. Then hope you are all following me. Jane Fairfax is very sweet lady, and she is very what brainy, and she is very cautious. Not like Emma, she takes decision on her own, thinking that she is Miss Perfect. Okay, like that. But Jane is not like that. Jane Fairfax is complete, though she is very cold. What do you mean by cold? What do you mean by cold? I hope you all know. Expressionless, always dumb, quiet, silent, like that. So she is cold as well as too cautious, and she criticizes Jane like this. Okay, the narrator herself suggests that Emma is in fact jealous of Jane. Okay, because Jane had previously met Frank, whom Emma has taken a liking to. Mr. Knightley defends Jane Fairfax, reminding Emma that whereas she is privileged, Jane has no fortune and and she should leave to work as a governess. Though she is intelligent, though she is beautiful, though she is sensible, but she doesn't have fortune like Emma because she is born rich, no, but she has to leave to some other place to work as a governess. And which somewhere, by hearing this, Emma somewhere she felt pinched and she started. We could find that way only when you read that novel you could understand the explanation and the way the author or the novelist explains that particular incident where when Mr. Knightley explains the predicament or the plight of Jane Fairfax, and the two, this is somewhat somewhere we get that Jane Austen is mirroring the society where she lived in. Got it? So somewhere Emma started having a soft corner for Jane. Then Mrs. Weston suspects that Mr. Knightley harbors some romantic feelings for Jane, and Emma adamantly denies this. Emma, she doesn't and believe that Mr. Knightley is actually in love with Jane Fairfax. Emma's initial interest in Frank does not last because she wants to visit Frank Churchill and she wants to become a friend of Frank Churchill. For what? If you are following the lecture, definitely you would know the answer. Why does she want to meet Frank Churchill? Because she is in search of a boy for Harriet, right? So, as soon as Mr. Elton project that he is not a good match for Miss Harriet, so she is in hunting. She is really in hunting for another guy. So her eyes fall on whom? she set her eyes sets on Frank Churchill, thinking that he might be the best match for Harriet. And let us see what happens. So after a while, she begins to imagine him as a perfect and potential match for Harriet. And when Harriet confesses her love for a man of a higher social status, Emma assumes that she means Frank. Okay, Frank Churchill. But as it turns out, Harriet is in love with who? Mr. Knightley, who at a recent village ball saved her from the embarrassment of being snubbed by Mr. Elton and his new wife. And meanwhile, Mr. Elton he left for Bath, and there she happened to meet a girl, lady called what? What's her name? Augusta, like that. So he gets married to that lady, and she comes back. See, one point I wanted to make here. This novel is full of parties, picnics, and balls. Okay, so the this also shows us that how upper class people in England, those were the time they used to enjoy their life, like merrymaking, okay, picnic going like that. And all the important characters we readers get introduced only in either in the parties or in the picnics. So as it turned out, especially in one particular incident, one particular party, where all the important characters gathered at one place. Mr. Elton, he tries to humiliate Miss Harriet, but at that time, particular part of time, Mr. Knightley, he saves her. So when Harriet openly makes a statement or openly tells Emma that she is in love with Mr. Knightley, which was really she becomes unbearable, and even she could not believe her own ears. And suddenly Emma realizes that she too loves Mr. Knightley. And we readers, we come to know that maybe there is a love and hatred relationship between Mr. Knightley and Emma. And so far, we have never discovered. We think that only they are behaving like enemies, but there is a blend of feelings, both love and hatred. Okay, so she realizes that if she had let Harriet marry Robert, she might have avoided this whole mess. And who is in charge or who is responsible for this whole mess? Emma herself. That's what the writer or the novelist herself introduced this character like that. Emma Woodhouse, handsome, rich, clever, but slightly spoiled. Got it? And so, and thus the denouement begins. Not long after Harriet's confession, Frank makes a hasty departure from Highbury. As he later explains in a letter to Emma, he writes a letter to Emma saying that he and Jane Fairfax have secretly been engaged all along. And this is again a greater shock for Emma. So far, she is thinking at least Frank Churchill is there to support her so that she can deviate Harriet from Mr. Knightley to uh, Frank Churchill. But even that hope also gone. Then his flirtation with Emma was just a ruse. And even when Emma wanted to be a friend of Frank Churchill, even he starts flirting with Emma, thinking that so the whole Highbury village it thinks that maybe Emma and Frank Churchill is going to get married, but it's wrong. So he writes a letter to Emma saying that why does he flirt with Emma? Because his flirtation with Emma was just to protect Jane, because she belongs to very lower class of the society, where the society or the Highbury society does not let a man who belongs to, especially a woman who belongs to lower class, to get married with a upper class man. So Emma and Mr. Knightley discuss this surprise. Okay, later on, turn to events. To Mr. Knightley's surprise, Emma confesses that she never loved Frank at all. Even Mr. Knightley was also under the impression that even maybe she has love towards or love for Frank Churchill. But she openly, for the first time, she confesses that she never ever loved Frank. Mr. Knightley, in response, professes his love for Emma. See, that's what I told you. At the end of the novel, we get a sudden twist, what we have never expected. So she is overjoyed and they implicitly agree to be married. But still, she has something tickling in her mind and heart. What is that? Because she has, in the beginning of the novel itself, she wanted to give a safe future or better future for whom? Harriet Smith. Then what will be the plight of Harriet? So she briefly worries about Harriet and how she will receive the news of their engagement. So even there also Mr. Knightley has a plan to get Harriet to marry with whom? Robert Martin, whom he had thought was the perfect match in the beginning itself, right? For that also, for that sake, the both of them had a quarrel in the beginning of the novel. So Emma is pleased to learn that Harriet has decided to marry Robert after all. So the novel thus concludes with three marriages. One is between one is between Jane and Frank, and second is between Harriet and Robert, and finally third marriage is between Emma and Mr. Knightley. Got it. Hope you all understood the novel, the summary, and let me concentrate on the important themes of the novel. What are the themes? As I have told you, marriage and the social status. This is also one of the important themes what we could find in this novel. Got it. So, how social status is very important during those days, especially marriage and status are the two foci of this novel, Emma. And most of the drama and the novels, especially in Austen's novel, the story revolves around who loves who. Okay, and what that means, or give their social status, especially even being a woman, a lady, the writer, she belongs to the upper class. She aristocratic notion we could find in her novel, and that she wanted to portray and project through her writing. So, social status in 19th century England was determined by a confluence of factors, including but not limited to family name or birthright or sex, reputation or wealth, and it dictated much about the course of a person's life, and it differs from person to person. And members of the higher social classes were not expected to intermarry during those days. I am talking about which century? 19th century England. Got it? So it differs from person to person and their ideology or their way of style, what life, everything. In fact, in some cases, such marriages were considered inappropriate. And through Emma, Austen subtly satirizes her society obsession with social distinction. And she also tries to project the social distinctions by portraying the characters, the various characters belong to two classes, and the tug of war sometimes, or liking between each other, sometimes like that. So, at the beginning of the novel, Austen's heroine is very confident. She knows who the chosen and the best, okay, quote unquote. So her heroine Emma herself, she says, I know the chosen and the best. So these are the things or the phrases are in Highbury. This sets in the mind of Highbury village or Highbury people, and who constitutes the second set. And keeping with her social code, Emma discourages Harriet from pursuing the relationship with Robert. I told you, because Robert belongs to farmer. He is a son of a farmer, and how could one find a social status, or how could one elevate their social status? I told you, only through marriages or inheritance. So, as Emma explains, Robert is not a gentleman. See, again, the concept of gentleman occurs. And yesterday's in my lecture, I was talking about in the Great Expectation, who wanted to be a gentleman? Pip, right? Then what do you mean by gentleman, or what do you mean by the concept of a gentleman? Gentleman, to first and foremost, in their view, is to become rich, wealthy, and social status. They have to elevate their status in a society, right? So that's why Emma says in a conversation with Mr. Knightley that Mr. Robert is not a gentleman. Okay, he is therefore destined to become a completely gross, vulgar farmer, totally inattentive to appearances and thinking of nothing but profit and loss. Okay, she describes in her words. And why does she dislike Robert? Because this, a completely gross, vulgar farmer, totally inattentive to appearances and thinking of nothing but profit and loss. So Emma is similarly appalled when Mrs. Elton presumes to call Mr. Elton and Mr. Knightley Mr. E and Knightley. Got it? So only those were the days the prefix Mr. to be added only to the people who belong to upper class. Hope I am making my point clear. So Mr. Knightley challenges Emma's notion of class distinction here, pushing her to contemplate whether such distinction truly matter. Okay, when Emma criticizes Robert for his ungentlemanly behavior or demeanor, Mr. Knightley impassionedly defends Robert and claiming that he has more true gentility than Harriet Smith could never ever understand. Okay, after all her attempts to make suitable matches fail, Emma finally begins to realize that social distinction does not equate to a constitutional difference in character. Okay, social status is not at all important. Instead, compassion, affection, and loyalty and gentility that matters. Even this was also realized in the novel Great Expectation at the end of the novel by Pip, right? So by the end of the novel here, Emma has learned her lesson and she decided that it would be a great pleasure to know Robert Martin. Finally, she also agrees with Mr. Knightley totally. So, in terms of its subject matter, Emma was by no means a revolutionary kind of novel, but where the writer or the novelist herself described the novel subject, three or four families in a country village. Okay, which is an ideal subject for any novel. And however, this novel Emma was revolutionary. Somewhat we should accept it may be a revolutionary or it can be a revolutionary novel in terms of its form and style. Because for the first time, Austen she wanted to what bring or portray or mirror the society how it was without any coloring to it. Got it? So, before Austen novelists generally used either first or third person narration to tell their stories, and Austen combined the two styles. First, in especially her other novels, Sense and Sensibility, okay, Pride and Prejudice, very important. If you have time, please go through the other novels, but you should concentrate more on Emma because this novel is prescribed for your study, and this is also very important for your examination sake. And this is very simple novel you can understand by one reading. You have to concentrate on the themes, so story, themes of the novel, and the what I can say, the technicality of the novel. The writer, how does she wants to project the themes, the central themes or the concept of the novel, of her novel. So from the outset, Austen characterizes Emma as a self-deluded young woman, and Austen's style of narration allows the reader to share in Emma's delusion. Very interestingly, she what describes each and everything. Like the longer she considered it, the greater was her sense of experience. So just I wish to tell you one instant where Mr. Elton's situation was most suitable, quite the gentleman himself, and without low connections. At the same time, not of any family that could fairly object to the doubtful birth of Harriet. And he had a comfortable home for her, and Emma imagined a very sufficient income for. Though the what we can say the courage of White Highbury was not large, so he was known to have some independent property, and she thought very highly of him as a good humored and well meaning, respectable young man, and without any deficiency of useful understanding or knowledge of the world. So, this is how the novelist portrayed the character Mr. Knightley. And here we have so many narrations, first person, and Jane Austen, she uses third person narrator from the point of heroine and using phrases like quite the gentleman himself and a comfortable home for her, like that. So by using these terms or phrases, Austen evokes Emma's consciousness, okay, through a type of what I can say, subjective narration or the pre-indirect discourse. Yeah, hope I made myself clear and I am audible enough. Then let us see how the legacy or how Jane Austen Emma changed the pace of fiction. And the story of a self-deluded heroine in a small village, Jane Austen's Emma hardly seems revolutionary, as I told you, but 200 years after it was first published, John Millen argues that it belongs to alongside the work of Flaubert, Joyce, and Woolf, Virginia Woolf, as one of the great experimental novels. But still, Emma, the novel, where it was composed by Jane Austen over the next year, she wanted to portray the real 19th century England. Got it. And this is also very important to know that how the themes, though the story is very simple, the themes are very important, and as well as the character. And let me give you a brief what introduction or a note or what I can say, short notes on this and what the themes of Emma and few characters. Marriage and social status, I have already discussed. Emma is structured around the number of marriages, and even it also ends with three marriages, right? So, yet the novel suggests that marrying too far above oneself leads to strife. Mr. Weston's first marriage to Miss Churchill, okay, had ostensibly been a good move for him because she came from a wealthy and well-connected family. We are talking about Mr. Weston because how marriage also plays a dominant role in what we can say molding somebody's personal life. So he marries Mrs. Weston. Okay, when Mr. Weston marries Miss Churchill, though he has a safe or secured life in the matter, financially secure and socially secured life, but still he was not at all happy with her. Got it? Because that aristocratic woman, and he should be a yeoman always. You know the meaning of yeoman, right? So his first marriage was not at all happy. But after the death of his first wife, later he gets married to Mrs. Weston, Miss Weston or Miss Taylor, as you all know. So he who is Emma's governess. Okay, and he marries Mrs. Taylor just prior to the novel's opening. And this second marriage is happier because their social status are more equal, and we could find very good understanding and compatibility between Mr. and Mrs. Weston because both their level of thinking, their wavelengths matches very well. So Mrs. Weston is a governess, and thus she knows the hardship of life, and she has passed through many hurdles in her life, so that she never ever wished to hurt her husband. So Emma's attempt to match Harriet with Mr. Elton is also shunned by the other characters as inappropriate, especially Mr. Knightley. Since Harriet's parentage is unknown, Emma believes that Harriet may have noble blood and encourages her to reject what turns out to be a more appropriate match. She thinks that Miss Harriet, she belongs to noble blood, royal blood, like that. By the time it is revealed that Harriet is the daughter of a tradesman at the, I think, in the middle of the novel, Emma admits that. So then Mr. Martin is maybe or might be the best match for her friend Harriet. Okay, next another important theme of this novel is the role of women in this novel, the confined nature of women's existence. So the novel's limited, almost claustrophobic scope of this novel or action gives us a strong sense of the confined nature of a woman's existence in the early 19th century. and the two in rural England. Hope are you all following me? And if you have any doubts, you can ask me. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I'm trying to make myself clear. Then, this is also very important because in this novel, how uh, the writer or the novelist herself wanted to project the role of women and their status, their problems, everything. Like how Daniel Defoe has projected the status of women in his novel Moll Flanders. You know, no? So, and even the central character Moll, she also says, no, had the society been treated women like me in a respective manner, I wouldn't have been a wife to many men and thief to be caught by the police. Like a very open statement she makes. Very interesting, very realistic character. So please read the novel, then only you can understand the novel. At the same time, you can enjoy, and you can have what the moral message the novelist or the writer wanted to give to the readers. So Emma she possesses a great deal of intelligence and energy, but the best use she can make of this is to attempt to guide the marital destinies of her friends. A project that gets her into trouble. She thinks that she can or establish herself as a very good matchmaker, but due to her overconfidence or due to her immaturity, uh, like okay, so all these things which pulls her down. The alternative pastimes depicted in the book, that social visits, social gatherings, charity visits, music, picnics, and artistic endeavors, seem relatively trivial. And at times, even we could also find this is somewhat like a monotonous and a mechanical world. How people belonged to aristocratic family, they had considered life as to be. So Isabella is the only mother focused on in the story. Isabella happens to be the Emma's elder sister who got married to the younger brother of Mr. Knightley. I have already mentioned it. So she is the only woman character, and we have a mother. She is the what we can say young mother who is always focusing in the story, and she portrayed as a very responsible mother, and she offers a woman little use of her intellect. So, at the our writer or Jane Austen, she compares the governess profession to the slave trade. Okay, because when Jane Fairfax, when Mr. Knightley tells Emma that though she is well read, though she is beautiful, and she is also she has also acquired so many skills, and she knows how to play piano very well, and she is a pianist, who Jane Fairfax, but still she has to leave for other uh, place to work as a governess. So in those days, to the governess profession is equal to the slave trade. Got it? She makes it clear that the life of a working woman is in no way preferable to the idleness of a woman of fortune. Got it? So the novel focuses on marriage because marriage offers women a chance to exert their power. Got it? Because indirectly she is saying that money is everything. Of course, money is everything. And social status is important. Only when you work, see, those were the days. Now the picture is completely different. But those in this present generation, if you are economically independent, though you earn a few bucks, you feel really independent, you feel really happy. No need to go and beg before someone. But those days, see, to work as a governess is also considered as a slave trade, because there is in the words of the author, because she puts words into the mouth of who, the character Emma, like that. She says that nowhere the governess profession is equal to a woman of fortune. Okay, just an idle woman of fortune, imagine. So the novel focuses on marriage. So she says, what is the way for a woman to, what I can say, elevate her position or status? Only the marriage. So the marriage, it has been played a very important role, and it is considered as a very important major tool to elevate somebody's, especially women's status in the society. So, if only for a brief time or a better time, a woman has to, in if at all a woman wish to enhance or elevate her position, she should get married to a man belong to upper class. Don't worry, even in this present generation or present era, all of us, many of us, have a blind notion that only if you get married your daughter or your sister or somebody to the rich family, their status is like that. But no, that is completely after the picture is completely different once you get married to that, unless and until you have your own position and your independence and your there's so many things because you should not compromise with anything. Okay, but we are talking about the 19th century England and how women were treated and how was the position of women, status of women, and very beautifully Jane Austen has portrayed everything in detail in this novel. So, participating in the rituals of courtship and accepting or rejecting proposals is perhaps the most active role that women are permitted to play in Emma's world. Got it? So, another important aspect of the novel is imagination, and we could also find that what the theme this is a very important thing, like sometimes you may get questions on uh, bring out the imaginary world of Emma. Okay, or bring out the theme of imagination or illusion versus reality in Emma. Okay, there only if you know the story and if you know the characters through and through, can you, you can be able to write what we really or what the examiner really expected you to write in your answer scripts. So the novel offers sharply critical illustration of the ways in which personal biases or desires blind objectives judgment. So Emma cannot understand the motives that guide Mr. Elton's behavior because she imagines that he is in love with Harriet. That's what I told you. This novel we have so much of illusions, of course, as and we have that concept like illusion versus reality, and reality is completely different. So Mr. To begin with, Mr. Elton's behavior, Emma imagines that he may be in love with Harriet, but actually he is in love with whom? Emma. So she later admits to herself that she had taken up the idea she supposed and made everything bend to it. Meanwhile, Mr. Elton's feelings for Emma caused him to mistake her behavior for encouragement. So, in general, generally, infallible Mr. Knightley cannot form an unbiased judgment of Frank Churchill because he is jealous of Frank's claim on Emma somewhere. And Emma speaks cruelly of Jane because her vanity makes her jealous of Jane's accomplishments. Right. So Emma's bias causes her, like, which makes her to invent an attachment between Harriet and Frank and blind her to the fact that Harriet actually has feelings for Knightley than to uh, Frank. Then at the same time, Frank's desire to use Emma as a protection or Emma as a shield for his real preferences for whom? Jane Fairfax. And which causes him to believe mistakenly that she is aware of the situation between him and Jane. And the admirable, frequently ironic detachment of the narrator, who is the narrator? Emma, right, allows us to see many of these misunderstandings before the characters do. And sometimes we have a third person narration, sometimes Emma herself tells us the story, right? And here, especially the writer, the novelist herself, she tells us the story. So this leads these misunderstandings before the characters do, along with the humorous aspects of their behavior, and the plot is powered by a series of realization that permit each character to make fuller, more objective judgments. Okay, I think this is all about this novel, and if you have any doubts, you can ask me questions. Yeah. Uh, First question, you may have the characteristic analysis. They may ask you to make an attempt or attempt a character sketch of Emma Woodhouse. Emma Woodhouse, and then can you consider Emma as a realistic novel? Okay, then bring out the element of illusion versus reality. Okay, illusion versus reality in Emma. Got it? Yeah. Then concentrate or bring out the major themes of the novel, Emma. So far, I had discussed right marriage and social status, status of women, then imagination, the illusionary world, or illusion versus reality. That's all form the ground of this novel. And as I have already mentioned you that this forms the platform, or this is the main foci of this novel, Emma. Any questions? Yeah, of course, money is everything. Money is necessary, but not everything. But during those days, and even come on for even in this century, everything. People are under the notion that if you have money, you have everything. Peace of mind, or status, or luxury, everything. But in fact, it is vice versa. Any questions? Are you all following me? Okay, and let me not waste time. I wanted to give you a brief introduction regarding William Wordsworth because hardly we have time to cover all the portions, and we try to, but still we try to cover the important aspects of the novel and important questions, major questions, which will be there for your examinations. So I am concentrating more on the what I can say the major questions like major novels and which will be there for 10 marks. Okay. And then Wordsworth, as we all know that Wordsworth is a very important romantic poet, and he was one of the founders of English Romanticism and one of the central figures and important intellect, and he can be theorist, critic, right? And who can be the founders of English Romanticism, who can considered as, or who is called as the founder of Romanticism in English literature. And he is remembered as a poet of nature, right? He is the poet of nature, and he is remembered as a poet of spiritual and epistemological speculation, a poet concerned with the human relationship to nature, and a fierce advocate of using the vocabulary and speech patterns of commonplace in poetry. He is also the profounder of pantheism. Okay, that is also very important. And he is the poet of nature. And he, what do you mean by pantheism? You should remember these terms because you are all literary students. You should be thorough with all these literary terms, and you all should have two important things with you always. One is a dictionary, and another one is the glossary of literary terms. Okay, that book, both the books you should have. If you have any queries, you can drop me a message. I'm waiting to answer. And yesterday, some students were asking me to concentrate more on great expectation. So I was expecting them to come up with some queries. Even I had messaged you. And if you have any queries or any difficulties in understanding such and such a novel, please come up with some questions so that let us have a discussion over it so that you can understand what is what, right? Yeah, I was talking about Wordsworth. What do you mean by pantheism? I told you. Pantheism. Pantheism means one should, uh, the poet or a person, one should find a god through nature. Okay, he can, Wordsworth, of course, he is a worshipper of nature, he is a nature poet, a poet of nature, and at the same time, he is the one who finds God or Almighty through the nature. So, this is the concept called pantheism. This is called the concept of pantheism. And he was born in 1770 in Cockermouth, Cumberland, and located in the Lake District of England, and which is an area that would become closely associated with Wordsworth for over 2 centuries, even after his death. So he began writing poetry as a young boy in grammar school, and before graduating from college, he went on a walking tour of Europe, and which deepened his love for nature and his love for poetry and his sympathy for the common man, and both major themes in his poetry. And that's what he wrote lyrical ballads, right? Preface to lyrical ballads and lyrical ballads. There he proposed the theory of the simplicity and placing the common man as an important character in his poetry. Got it? And he wrote that lyrical ballads, what I can say, the classic or the prim philosophy, with the help of his friend Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Then let us know, what do you mean by romanticism? Do you think what you mean by romanticism is nothing but between a boy and a girl, or between Romeo and Juliet? No, it is completely different concept. Romanticism, it was a wave of literary expression that originated in Europe towards the end of the 18th century. Got it? So this is characterized by its emphasis on emotional and spiritual values, as well as its deep engagement with the nature and the self. So Romanticism caused a revolutionary stir in the history of English poetry and the rhythmic compositions. Got it? Let me repeat it. Romanticism, it is a wave of literary expression that originated in Europe towards the end of the 18th century, and which gives more preference for emotions, feelings, okay, and spiritual values as well. So it also it has a deep engagement with nature and the self, nature and the poet, or nature and the human beings. So William Wordsworth was one of the first English romantic poet who, along with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, began the wave of romanticism in English literature with their joint publication Lyrical Ballads, and which which became the philosophy or the important base for romantics, other romantic poets. So he is a poet laureate. William Wordsworth remains one of the most popular romantic poets. And this is time for me to stop. And if you have any doubts, you can ask me. Any doubts? Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for your patient listening to my lecture. And if you have doubts, you can ask me even in my last session of today's. I have a last class. And in my last class also, you can ask me the questions. Doesn't matter. Thank you. Thank you.